Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. Case 1. Sarah Sharif was born on January 11, 2013 in Slough, County Berkshire, England to parents Irfan Sharif and Olga Doman. Sarah had long brown hair, big brown eyes, and a sweet smile. She loved singing, dancing, and playing the guitar. Irfan was of Pakistani origin, but had moved to the UK on a student visa in 2003 to study business management in London. At the time of our story, he worked as a taxi driver. Olga was originally from Poland and spoke very little English. The pair met in Poland, and Irfan convinced Olga to come back to the UK with him. The couple married in 2009 and soon gave birth to Sarah's older brother a year later. As he's a minor, we'll be referring to him as Z throughout our story. Sarah also had another sibling born after Z that we'll refer to as U, although not a lot is known about them. Things didn't remain happy in the Sharif household for long. Irfan and Olga separated in 2015 and quickly divorced. Sarah and U originally resided with their mother, but in 2019, custody was awarded to Irfan. From there, they were whisked away, first to a tiny two-bedroom council flat in West Byfleet, then to a bigger semi-detached council house on Hammond Street in Orrall. There, Sarah and U lived with their new stepmother, 30-year-old Binish Batul, Irfan's 29-year-old brother Faisal Malik, and 4 other children that the media described as belonging to the couple. Irfan had met Binish after picking her up in his taxi, while still married to Olga. Because Olga objected to her children being raised in the Muslim faith, her ex-husband cut off all contact. But in 2023, Sarah was allegedly bullied at school for wearing a hijab, after which she was pulled out of class and homeschooled by her stepmother. But we all know how that goes, and as we'll find out later in our story, it had nothing to do with bullying. On August 9, 2023, emergency services received a 999 call that was placed from Islamabad, Pakistan. On the call, a man confessed to the dispatchers that, "I've killed my daughter, and it wasn't my intention to kill her, but I beat her up too much." He claimed that his actions were intended as punishment, coldly admitting, "I'm a cruel father." That man was Irfan Sharif, who had fled England with his wife, brother, and 5 surviving children. In the early morning hours of August 10th, Sarah's body was located at the family's Hammond Road address by the Surrey police. She had been placed underneath a blanket in her bunk bed. All of the adults in the home were immediately named persons of interest, due to not only the 999 call, but a 3-page note that was left behind that read as follows. "I swear to God that my intention was not to kill her, but I lost it. My daughter is Muslim. Can you bury her like a Muslim, maybe? I will be back before you finish the post-mortem. Whoever sees this note, it's me, Irfan Sharif, who killed my daughter by beating. I am running away because I am scared, but I promise that I will hand over myself and take punishment. Love you, Sarah." At her autopsy 5 days later on August 15th, Sarah presented with numerous severe injuries that the medical examiner noted had been inflicted over time. 10-year-old girl was covered in more than 70 separate injuries, which included human bite marks, scalds on her feet, bruises, a burn on her, but that was caused by placing a hot iron onto her skin, a broken hyoid bone, a puncture wound to the head, a traumatic brain injury, 11 spinal fractures, and other numerous injuries to her fingers, shoulder blades, and ribs. She also had injuries that showed evidence that Sarah had been restrained. It would later be revealed that Sarah had a hood placed over her head before being beaten with a metal pole and a cricket bat. There were so many injuries, it was impossible to figure out which of them actually caused her death. On September 12, 2023, police raided a home in Jhelum, Punjab, Pakistan, belonging to Irfan's father. There, they were able to locate Irfan's 5 surviving children, who were unharmed and subsequently placed into foster care. On September 13th, all 3 adults were arrested at London's airport after flying back home by way of Sialkot in Dubai. It should be noted that there is no official extradition agreement in place between the United Kingdom and Pakistan. On September 14th, Irfan Sharif, Binish Batul, and Faisal Malik were arrested and charged with the murder, along with an additional charge of causing or allowing the death of a child. When Binish was interviewed by the police, she didn't have a ton of useful things to say. "You're about to be interviewed for the offense of murder. What's your understanding of murder? What's your understanding of that offense? Killing someone. Yeah, okay, so it's intentionally killing somebody, okay, in very simple terms, okay. That's the offense which you've been arrested for, and that's the offense which we're going to speak to you about, alright? What happened to Sarah? No comment. What did you see? No comment. Whose choice was it? How you left Sarah? No comment. You know, Dawn's just said, as you said in the video, you want to come back to the UK, clear your name in the UK courts. Well, here we are. This is the start of the process. So why would you not speak to us now? No comment. Who did that to Sarah? No comment. Do you love Sarah? No comment. Did you care about her at all? No comment. According to Irfan's father, Muhammad Sharif, as a stepmother, Binish Batul's behavior was not good with Sarah, and she always used to scold her constantly. Sarah had complained to Irfan about Batul's behavior, and she, Batul, denied it and said the children are lying. They all remained in custody ahead of the hearings at both the Guildford Magistrates' Court and London's Old Bailey via video conference. In December of 2023, all 3 adults pled not guilty to all charges. The jury was sworn in on October 8, 2024, with the trial beginning shortly thereafter. On October 14th, the prosecution shared with the court the 999 call that Irfan placed after landing in Pakistan, claiming that he legally punished his daughter. We'll play that for you now. Hello? Yes, hello. Is everything okay? Nothing is okay. Can you write down my address, please? I don't understand what you're saying. Can you write down my address, please? Okay, what's your postcode? GU21 Yep. 42 Tango Quebec. Okay, what's happened? What number? What number? Okay, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and tell me what's happened. I need you to take a breath because I cannot understand what you're saying, okay? Your daughter has died. Okay. Okay, don't worry. Hello, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still here. Okay. Who's killed your daughter? Okay, how? I'm gonna need you to slow down, okay? How have you killed your daughter? Okay, where is your daughter now? Okay, where are you? Okay, what's your name? What is your name? Can you spell that for me? Yep. Sorry, you are? Okay, second name, please. Brilliant. Can I get your date of birth? Sorry, my date of birth is November 25th, 81. Hello? Hello, I'm still here. I'm just writing all of this down. Can you send someone my daughter? Yes, yes, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Nothing's going to be slowed down, okay? Okay. I need you to slow down, okay? What is your daughter's name? Okay, I need you to slow down, okay? How do you spell your daughter's name? Sarah? Yep. Okay, what's her date of birth? Okay, what happened? What led to this all happening? Was she breathing when you left? Okay, was she bleeding anywhere? Okay, what injuries did she sustain? How long ago was this? When did this happen? I need you to listen to me, okay? When did this happen? This happened 36 hours ago. Where are you right now? So you're driving right now? Okay, what is your registration number? I left my. Okay. What sort of car is it? Sorry, what was that? Sorry, what car are you in right now if you're not driving your car? No, don't worry, we are already deployed. This is not slowing any of this down, okay? Whose car are you in? Whose car are you in though? Okay, is anyone else at the home with your daughter? Okay. Yep, don't worry, we're already sending officers on the way, okay? What? Do you know the registration for the car that you're driving? Whose car is it? It's my son's car, I'm not sure. Could you please go there? I'll get back to you soon. I'll hand over myself. I'll come to Walking Street Station. No, you need to go back to the address now, okay? You need to go back to the address. I will. Okay, so where are you? I know you said you're driving, but can you see a road? Where are you right now? I cannot give more detail. I promise I'll come back. I'll face the justice. I need to know where you are. Okay, I'm like, give me a landmark, give me anything. Where are you? Do you know what town you're in? I don't know. Okay, so if you live in Woking, are you driving through Guildford? Are you driving through West Byfleet? Are you driving through Aldershot? Where are you driving right now? At the trial, the gloves came off with Binish's lawyer, Caroline Carberry, claiming that Irfan had a sham marriage with Olga because she was Polish and thus a member of the EU. Attorney Carberry inferred that Irfan was targeting Polish women because he was looking for a pathway to European citizenship. In fact, according to Binish, Irfan had gotten married to a second Polish woman at some point, took her passport, and locked her up. Thankfully, she escaped. On December 11, 2024, both Irfan Sharif and Binish Batul were found guilty on all counts. Faisal Malik was found not guilty on the charge of murder, but was found guilty of causing or allowing the death of a child. On December 17th, they were back in court for sentencing. There, Sarah's mother, Olga, shared the following victim impact statement with the court. Sarah was always smiling. She had her own unique character. The only thing I had left to give my daughter was to give her a beautiful Catholic funeral that she deserves. She is now an angel who looks down on us from heaven. She is no longer experiencing violence. To this day, I can't understand how someone can be such a sadist to a child. Addressing her ex-husband and his new wife, she said, "You are sadists. Although even this word is not enough for you, I would say you're executioners." Justice Kavanaugh condemned the pair for not showing a shred of remorse and described Sarah's treatment as nothing short of torture. The full video is over 49 minutes long and is available to view in our show notes. We'll play a portion for you now. The marks were consistent with restraints being used. In other words, with Sarah being tied up. Many of these injuries had tramline markings which showed that she had been beaten with an elongated object. You, Irfan Sharif, have admitted to beating Sarah on a number of occasions with a metal pole, part of a high chair. The pole was found at the property after Sarah's death. You also admitted to beating Sarah with a cricket bat, which was also found at the property. At one stage, you admitted to doing this multiple times, but then you changed your evidence, would only admit to doing so once. I have no doubt that in fact this was a regular occurrence. In addition to the 71 fresh injuries, the medical experts found a total of 25 separate fractures to the bones in Sarah's body. These included a fractured collarbone, 2 fractured shoulder blades, fractured ribs, a fractured humerus, 11 separate fractures to her spinal column, and fractures to bones in both of her hands. This is not a case of a single episode of maltreatment, therefore. This poor child was battered with great force again and again. Some of the injuries require special mention because they demonstrate the almost unbelievable torture to which Sarah was subjected in the last weeks of her life. The medical experts identified a fracture in the hyoid bone in Sarah's neck. This is a very unusual injury and was the result of very vigorous and energetic manual strangulation, quite possibly on more than one different occasion. Sarah sustained a serious brain injury a few days before she died as a result of a blow to her head. In addition, when she died, Sarah had open burn wounds on the bones of the inside of each ankle. The only possible explanation for this, as is made clear by the medical evidence, is that Sarah's ankles were tied, and then either her feet were wrapped around a hot pipe or, more likely, boiling water was poured on her ankles. Once again, the wounds had not been treated and no medical help had been sought for Sarah. The post-mortem investigation showed that Sarah had 6 bite marks on her body. 5 of them were on her left arm, and 1 was on the inside of her left thigh. The marks were made by an adult. Hugh, Irfan, Sharif and Faisal Malik and Sarah's older brother each provided teeth impressions, and each was excluded from being responsible for the tooth marks. Hugh Ben Ashpoodle declined to give a tooth impression, and the only possible inference is that it was Hugh who made these bite marks. Though the bite marks were not in themselves fatal injuries, the fact that you were prepared to assault Sarah in this way provides an insight into the extent to which you were complicit in and comfortable with the abuse that Sarah was suffering. But the medical and forensic evidence does not stop there. It is absolutely clear that in the last few weeks of her life, Sarah was tied up. She was trussed up with masking tape and with skipping rope. Even worse, she was hooded. Plastic bags were put over her head, which were then held in place with masking tape, and a hole was ripped in the plastic bag through which she could breathe. This treatment of a 10-year-old child is nothing short of gruesome. It is hard to imagine how terrifying it must have been for Sarah, especially as the treatment was at the hands of her own parents. In the end, Justice Kavanaugh sentenced Irfan Sharif to a minimum term of 40 years in prison, Dinesh Batul to 33 years in prison, and Faisal Malik to 16 years. Libby Clark from the Crown Prosecution Service shared the following words after the sentencing. Sarah Sharif was a lively and joyful 10-year-old girl whose life was tragically cut short by the very people who should have protected and cared for her. The evidence in this case painted a devastating picture of the suffering Sarah experienced leading up to her death and the campaign of abuse she was being subjected to in her own family home. Her injuries revealed the extent of the cruelty inflicted upon her, while the defendant's actions after her death demonstrated a shocking disregard for her life as they attempted to flee the country to evade justice, thinking only of themselves. Whilst her father and stepmother were responsible for subjecting Sarah to horrific abuse, her uncle took no action to stop or report it. This has been an incredibly complex and distressing case. It is thanks to the tireless work of the prosecution team, Surrey Police, international partners, and the CPS International Unit that we were able to secure justice for Sarah. I also want to thank the jury for their careful consideration of the harrowing evidence presented in court. Today's sentences reflect the cruelty and gravity of their crimes, and while no sentence can bring Sarah back, we hope this outcome is able to provide some small comfort to all those that knew and loved her. But long before Sarah's tragic death, there were clues to Irfan's violent past that could potentially save Sarah's life if the complaints were taken seriously. In fact, before Sarah was even born, the police and social services were already a part of the family's lives. Records indicate that between 2010 and 2012, there were already 4 calls to the couple's home for reports of family violence. In 2010, Surrey County Council Children's Services became involved due to reports of violence and neglect directed at Sarah's older brother, Z. That same year, Z was found abandoned in a shop. Also that same year, Irfan was arrested for assaulting both Olga and Z. He hit the little boy so hard that he left a handprint on his back. In 2011, reports alleged that Z told his teachers that his father hit him. The following year, he claimed that it was his mother. He was found with burn marks on his body, and once again, he was abandoned out on his own. This time, he was located at Woking Town Center, wandering around a half a mile from his home. Social workers noted additional injuries on Z's body, as well as on Yu's body, who had been born by this time. They also noted that the children's bedrooms lacked light bulbs and bedding. In 2013, Z suffered a very familiar burn. He'd been burned by a hot clothes iron, much like Sarah would be years later. When Sarah was born that same year, she was immediately placed under a care order. This gave the police and social services legal responsibility for the 3 children in the Sharif home. In November of 2014, Sarah and her siblings were briefly placed in the foster care after her brother Z claimed to have been bitten by his mother and pinched and punched by his father. Although Olga and Irfan claimed there were chickenpox scars, the foster parents noticed cigarette burns on both Sarah and Yu. In 2015, both Irfan and Olga were in court for a custody hearing. Olga accused Irfan of beating her and the kids and claimed that he was violent and controlling. Although it was never mandated, Irfan agreed to take part in family violence courses and counseling. It should be noted that prior to Irfan even meeting Olga, he was accused of intimate partner violence and false imprisonment by 2 separate ex-girlfriends, one in 2007 and one in 2009. It is unclear if either of these partners were the imprisoned Polish women we mentioned previously, but it is alleged that one of these ex-girlfriends was a minor. In total, Irfan had been arrested on at least 5 separate occasions for his behavior. That same year, Sarah and Yu returned home to the family, and Z remained in foster care. According to the BBC, Z never went back home with Irfan and Olga. Sarah was in foster care once more in 2015 after Olga left Irfan, alleging that there was family violence. It was around this time the couple separated for good, and Sarah began living with mother full-time. Through this history, Irfan was only allowed supervised visits. Everything seemed to calm down for the family up until Easter of 2019. It was then that Sarah confessed to Irfan that her mother had been hurting her. She told her father that Olga had tried to burn her with a lighter, had slapped her, pinched her, pulled her hair, and tried to drown her. Irfan videotaped this confession and submitted it to social services. It is unclear if this confession was coached. In October of 2019, custody of both Sarah and Yu were awarded to Irfan and his new wife, Binish, despite his 5 arrests and previous police and social services involvement. It should be noted that the judge that awarded custody to Irfan was the same judge that had taken part in all of the Sharif family hearings from 2013 to 2015 and was well aware of the type man Irfan was. By January of 2023, Sarah began wearing a hijab to school to try to hide her bruises, but it didn't work. By March, mandated reporters were making calls to social services, but sadly, the case was dropped in a matter of mere days. The following month, Binish pulled Sarah out of school, and the violence only intensified in the last weeks of her life. She was forced to take care of all of the younger children and treated as a maid in her own home. Sarah was singled out for being a girl, Olga's girl. She was smart, sassy, feisty, and spirited. She wasn't submissive like Irfan wanted her to be, and she stood up to him. Sarah was referred 15 times to social services in the course of her lifetime, but sadly, it wasn't enough to save her life. Case 2. Marcus DeLon Wesson was born on August 22, 1946 in Kansas. He was the first child of Benjamin and Carrie Wesson, who had suffered a stillbirth just a few years prior. After Marcus, Benjamin and Carrie welcomed 3 more children. The family were devout Christians and followers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Carrie Wesson described her and her husband as hard-working parents who raised brilliant, loving, God-fearing children. However, Marcus claimed his mother was a religious fanatic and that his father was an alcoholic and a child beater who abandoned his children when they were young. In the early 1960s, the Wessons said goodbye to Kansas and moved to San Bernardino, California. The Wesson children were raised to dress modestly, eat a vegetarian diet, and worship every Saturday as members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Marcus attended Fremont Junior High from 1960 to 1961 and San Bernardino High School from 1961 to 1964. He never went to any proms or school dances, as they were forbidden by his religion. Although he was over 6 feet tall and had the build of a football player, Marcus was a typical nerd. He sported a close-cropped haircut and dressed in slacks, a white shirt and a tie, in a classroom full of kids in jeans and t-shirts. In his free time, he studied, sang in the school choir, and played with his electric toy trains. It should be noted that Marcus was obsessed with trains. His childhood friend, Charles H. Cox, remembers that they would watch freight trains pass through town and trade HO model trains. Marcus had shown signs of high intelligence from an early age. At just 2 years old, he had memorized the location of every song in his mother's huge stack of gospel records. Years later, he was able to put together intricate puzzles that confused adults. The young boy he rescued and cared for injured animals he found out and about. On one occasion, he found what appeared to be a dead dog in a trash can. His mother said the dog was dead. Marcus refused to listen. Placing his ear against the animal's chest, he shouted, "Mama, I can hear a faint heartbeat." He then took the dog home and nursed it back to health by feeding it milk day and night. As a teenager, Marcus was able to build go-karts and electric cars without any instruction. His construction work even caught the eye of an engineering professor at Stanford, who asked Marcus where he trained to be built like he did, which Marcus replied that he had no training. He was just a gift from God. While Marcus was intelligent, he never achieved enough credits to graduate high school. He dropped out early and enlisted in the U.S. Army on June 22, 1966. Records show he spent 10 weeks receiving medical corpsman training at Fort Sam Houston in Texas, before working as an ambulance orderly and driver of the 695th Medical Ambulance Company. He was mostly stationed in Europe, where he was based from November 27, 1966 to February 6, 1968. He was deployed in Vietnam at some point. On June 2, 1968, he returned to the United States and spent 4 years in the inactive reserves. He lived in San Jose, California, and moved in with Rosemary Solario, a middle-aged divorcee living with her young children, including 8-year-old Elizabeth Solario. Rosemary had just gotten out of an abusive marriage and said she grew fond of Marcus because he was kind and friendly, and he helped her look after her kids. While living with the Solarios, Marcus traveled to San Francisco a lot. Details of these visits are unknown, and his cousin Morgan Wesson always thought they were strange because Marcus was a homebody who didn't smoke, drink, or do drugs. He was also unemployed and had very little money. He noticed to Rosemary Marcus was becoming extremely close with her young daughter Elizabeth. According to a neighbor, in 1971, Elizabeth gave birth to Marcus' son. She was just 12 years old, and he was 25. It is unknown whether the baby died or was given up for adoption. 3 years later, in 1974, Marcus and Elizabeth got married. She was 15, and he was 27. They both listed their occupations as students. Marcus would tell Elizabeth that she belonged to him, that the Lord knew she was destined to become his wife. The couple relocated to Santa Clara County after the ceremony, and 4 months later, their son Dorian was born. By the end of the 1970s, the couple had 3 more children, Adrian, Kiani, and Sabrina. In the 1980s, Marcus and Elizabeth welcomed 6 more children, Alme, Marcus Jr., Elizabeth, Serafino, Gypsy, and Donovan, who sadly died at 6 months old from spinal meningitis. Marcus also had 4 nieces from his wife's side of the family, Safina Solario, Rosie Solario, Ruby Sanchez, and Ruby Ortiz. Marcus worked as a janitor to support his family, but never made enough money to put a decent roof over their heads. The Wessons had multiple homes, like a converted school bus, a sailboat anchored at Moss Landing in Monterey County, and a trailer in the mountains. Marcus made several welfare claims over the years because of his living conditions. In 1981, he finally bought a house using a $60,000 loan. It was small, run-down, and at the corner of Hammond and Weber Avenues. The house was infested with weeds, and toy freight trains would rumble around the home, weaving in and out of weeks-old trash that had piled up. Marcus and his family still kept ties with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the family started attending a 10-day spiritual retreat in Soquel. The Wesson family spent a lot of time at the Santa Cruz beach and harbor. The kids loved playing on the beach, and Marcus had been renting a permanent slip at the harbor for his small boat since September of 1984. In 1988, Marcus took his kids to the beach one day and met a Stanford University student named Steve Sobrato. The two began to talk, and Marcus boasted about raising his children with a Christian upbringing, homeschooling them, and keeping them away from what he described as corporate America. He also spun up a story about being a top bank executive who gave it all up to raise children. Steve praised the Wesson children for being so polite, quiet, and smart, and Marcus invited him for dinner on the boat. He remembers that day specifically because Marcus had served hamburgers from the dumpster at the back of the McDonald's. In 1989, Marcus was criminally charged with perjury and welfare fraud related to the sailboat he owned at Moss Landing. It was viewed as excess property, and county authorities said he was overpaid by more than $20,000 in benefits and food stamps. He appealed to the courts, claiming all the money was spent on shelter and food for his family. Marcus disliked his defense lawyer, Jim McMillan, and thought of himself as a better legal layman. As a result, he filed a series of motions independently, one of which was dismissed by the judge as gibberish. After that, Marcus started to believe the welfare department was conspiring against him. In one court document, he wrote that the welfare department felt, in their opinion, the suspect had simply been on welfare too long and is able-bodied and is using his educational background to stay on welfare. Marcus was convicted of welfare fraud and perjury in 1990 and sentenced to 5 years probation, 180 days in jail, and several fines. He was ordered to find a job and sell his boat to pay overdue bills at the harbor. Marcus appealed his conviction, but the court rejected the motion in 1992. After that, he was caught failing to follow the terms of his probation. In a letter to the court, Marcus described himself as old, unemployed, homeless, unskilled, with no work history. However, his defense lawyer, Jim McMillan, described Marcus as an eccentric but fairly intelligent, a man who seemed to have a full-time job simply managing his family. Jim visited the sailboat in the Wesson camp in the Santa Cruz Hills, noting it wasn't like they were living lifestyles of the rich and famous. Kiani Wesson remembers her father fondly, recalling how they enjoyed weekends at the beach in Monterey and Santa Cruz, and how they all went on trips to Fresno and Washington State. During these trips, Marcus would play tapes the family had mixed in recording sessions. The tapes packaged rock with Depeche Mode and Spanish-language music. Kiani also asserted Marcus was a devoted father who taught his children how to fish, swim, sail, and build a skateboard. He also took his kids to Woodward Park a lot, where they would ride bicycles, skateboard, and play in the water. Back at home, the children acted out plays, concerts, and beauty and ugly contests, where the boys would dress up in rags and the girls would wear pretty dresses. The kids also had competitions to see who could stay awake the longest. Sometimes Marcus would toss handfuls of change into the living room, setting off a scramble among the children. Elizabeth Wesson described her husband as very imaginative, loving husband and father, who saw his children as the most precious things in the world. Now, as we mentioned, Marcus homeschooled all of his children. He used flashcards to teach them to read and do math, and would assign them homework every week. The older children were also expected to teach their younger siblings. At Christmas time, the family celebrated the 12 days of Christmas with different food themes. Gingerbread Man Day, Spaghetti Day, Lobster Day, Trade Jobs Day, and even Dad Cooks Day. Keeney described those days as the best times of her and her siblings' lives. However, other members of the Wesson family remember a far more sinister story. Several children say discipline in the house was administered with a duct tape switch. When Marcus beat them, he would always say, "Well, you know I love you still, and the only reason I'm doing this is to make you a better person." He also forced boys and girls to live separately, so brothers and sisters hardly even knew each other. Relatives who began living with Marcus and his family in a rundown house and duplex on the southern edge of the Tower District in Fresno claim they saw Marcus essaying 6 young girls. They also said they saw him preach messages with extremely dark themes. Family loyalty meant a lot to Marcus, and he always stressed the importance of it, telling his children that they should remove themselves from this earth if CPS ever came to take them away. He would even ask them, if the time came, "Are you ready?" Marcus also made his children believe that he was Jesus Christ incarnate, and that all police officers were Satan. Marcus liked to interpret passages from the King James Bible as justification for his plan to impregnate his young nieces and his daughters. For example, in Genesis 19:30-38, after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot's daughters get him drunk on 2 consecutive nights and have relations with him in order to preserve the family line. In Genesis 20:12, Abraham says of his wife Sarah, "And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." Marcus' nieces Ruby Ortiz, Safina Solaro, and Rosie Solaro were all sent to live with him when they were young girls. He pulled them out of public school and never taught them to read or write. Instead, they were taught a subject that Marcus called loving. He would teach the girls how to please their future husbands and make them clean his locks, scratch his armpits, and sit on his lap. All 3 nieces testified that their uncle essayed them for a number of years. From as young as 8, Marcus would fondle them through their clothes. As they became older, he moved on to oral, and then finally intercourse. Ruby said her uncle had reassured her that this was a father's way to show affection to his daughter. By the time Ruby was 13, Marcus informed her that she was the perfect age to marry him, and that God wants a man to have more than one wife. He also emphasized that God's people are becoming extinct. We need to preserve God's children. We need to have more children for the Lord. Marcus married his nieces Ruby, Rosie, and Safina, and his daughters, Kiani and Sabrina, in a private wedding ceremony at home. By the mid-1990s, pregnancies were already starting to arise in the family. Ruby gave birth to a daughter, Aviv Dominique Wesson. Safina gave birth to a son, Jonathan St. Charles Wesson, and Rosie gave birth to 2 children, Sedona Vajra Wesson and Ethan St. Laurent Wesson. Marcus also fathered children with his own daughters. Sabrina gave birth to Marsher St. Christopher Wesson, and Kiani bore 2 children, Java St. Vladen Vespri Wesson and Illabel Carey Wesson. When the pregnancies were questioned by neighbors, Marcus and the girls would always claim the pregnancies occurred through artificial insemination. Kiani and Rosie insisted it was all consensual, noting, "Whatever happened in the home was by agreement and talk. It was totally by choice. We had a democratic family." Both girls testified that all the young women had agreed to be surrogate mothers for Marcus, whose wife Elizabeth was no longer able to bear children. However, Ruby and Safina both ran away from the household shortly after giving birth. Marcus continued to expand his unconventional collection of properties in the mid to late 1990s. He purchased 2 boats in Marshall, a town in Marin County. One of these boats was a dilapidated 63-foot tugboat where the family occasionally lived. Presidents of Marshall recalled Marcus's plans to refurbish the boat and sail around the world with his children. A rugged hills of Santa Cruz, Marcus maintained a large army tent. In 1997, he reached out to his friend Alex Wheeler to discuss the campsite. Alex had inherited the property from his father, A.J. Wheeler, a former IBM computer programmer. Marcus claimed to have a rent-to-own agreement with Alex's father for a 1/4 acre of land, though he couldn't provide any documentation. By 1998, the Weston family encampment had grown to include a large canvas tent, a motorhome, a trailer, various appliances, and scrap metal. Pipes, stoves, stainless steel sinks, bins, and tanks were scattered across the grounds. Although there was no running water, Marcus had constructed a makeshift bathroom with a shower and toilet in front of the motorhome. Despite Alex's friendly conversations with Marcus, who was articulate and well-spoken, he never received a straight answer regarding the property's clearance. Marcus once described himself as an indigenous derelict, which left Alex puzzled and quite uneasy. By the turn of the millennium, Marcus and Elizabeth Weston's children were teenagers or young adults, many working at places like McDonald's before moving on to jobs at the Radisson Hotel in downtown Fresno. Marcus managed the family's finances, with Keene Weston recalling he was our financial advisor. He could take $20 and make it seem like we had $200. While other people our age had no assets, no home, nothing, we gave our money to Marcus to invest. Meanwhile, Marcus's religious delusions became more bizarre as years went by. He started writing his own Bible, believing that he was a vampire Jesus Christ who held the link to eternal life. In this Bible, he wrote that drinking blood was the key to immortality. Marcus would also make his kids sit and watch vampire movies instead of homeschooling them like he should have. He also became a vehement supporter of Branch Davidian leader David Koresh, who had multiple wives and children. Many of those wives were little girls. David and nearly 80 followers died in a fire at their Waco, Texas complex, ending a 51-day siege by federal agents in 1993. While watching the news report of the siege, Marcus turned to his children and said, "This is how the world is attacking God's people. This man is just like me. He is making children for the Lord. That's what we should be doing, making children for the Lord." In 2000, the family's assets included a historic 2-story Tudor home near Fresno City College. Built in 1935, the house was sold by lawyer Frank Muna to Keani Wesson, Sabrina Wesson, Safina Solario, and Ruby Sanchez. Frank remembered the buyers leaving a note at the fire-damaged house expressing interest in purchasing it. He met with Marcus and several young women to discuss the necessary repairs. At first, Marcus claimed he wasn't related to the women, but later stated he was the uncle of 2 of the buyers. Although Marcus's name was not on the title, he contacted contractor Larry Prock after seeing his advertisement in the Thrifty Nickel. Larry represented the owners in a city hall hearing arguing against the house's demolition. Larry wasn't hired for the extensive remodeling job, though he estimated it at $80,000 and spent hours on the phone with Marcus, who was always cordial and polite. Marcus often discussed his family, boat, and views on homeschooling, even mentioning that he lived on a boat most of the time. However, the Cambridge Avenue house had numerous code enforcement issues. City complained about the lack of progress in refurbishing the home and noted that someone was living in an old shed behind the main house. Keani and Sabrina Wesson handled most of the code enforcement complaints, while officials who encountered Marcus at the house described him as a workman. In May 2001, Frank Muna sued the women for failing to pay the full price for the home. He noticed a close relationship between Marcus and the women, often seeing one with her hand in Wesson's back pocket or giving him a goodbye kiss on the lips. Frank also saw 2 coffins on the property, one of which seemed to be used as a crib for a baby. Enrique Reed, who worked for a Fresno funeral home, recalled Marcus buying several caskets from an antique store, claiming they were used for making furniture. Enrique encountered Marcus again at a yard sale, where he offered to buy the caskets, but Enrique refused. During this visit, Marcus was accompanied by 3 young women, one of whom appeared to be pregnant. In December of 2002, Marcus submitted a manuscript about his life to Vantage Press, a New York publishing company, but it was rejected for being incoherent. Big surprise. Meanwhile, the Cambridge Avenue house continued to face code enforcement battles. Inspectors noticed a large school bus and an enclosed utility trailer parked in the driveway, issuing citations for illegal storage of the vehicles. Most legal disputes dissipated when the house was sold a few weeks later, but the Wesson family, now larger and more complex, didn't move far. In September, Rosie purchased a new home near Roding Park, and the Wessons settled into the neighborhood. Despite their new residence, the family was still spotted around Marshall, often seen in the oceanfront town on their anchored boat. Residents of Marshall reported that authorities had evicted Marcus and his family from their boat due to several noise complaints. The family also faced conflicts with the city officials at their new Fresno home, located at 760 on West Hammond Avenue. Authorities claimed the family violated city codes by living in a building zoned for commercial, not residential use. Additionally, the converted school bus parked in the residential area drew further citations. Inspectors issued a citation and set a deadline for the family to either vacate the premises or obtain a special permit to stay. The deadline was March 12, 2004. At approximately 2 p.m. that day, Safina Solario and Ruby Sanchez returned to the Wesson house, wanting to reclaim their children because Marcus was planning to move to Washington State with them. They stood in the front yard, shouting for Marcus to release their children. He stood in the doorway, insisting the children remain with him until they were at least 7 or 8. According to court testimonies, this was to ensure he had ample time to mold them in his image. Taking matters into her own hands, Safina barged her way into the house and grabbed her son by the hand. But Marcus snatched him back and pushed Safina back outside. Kiani, Sabrina, Rosie, and Elizabeth then started shouting Judas at Safina, and Sabrina called Ruby an adulterer for leaving the household. The yelling and tears resulted in neighbors calling the Fresno Police Department. At 2:20 p.m. police arrived at the scene thinking they were just dealing with a child custody dispute. They were met with one of the worst homicides in Fresno's history. When Marcus saw the police officers, he slammed the door shut and locked it. Moments later, a series of gunshots pierced the air. Police surrounded the area, and Marcus calmly reemerged from the house covered in blood. After an 80-minute standoff, he was handcuffed and ushered into a police car. When officers entered the home, they found 9 bodies stacked up in the back bedroom, with Sabrina lying at the top of the pile. Each person had been shot once in the right eye using a .22 caliber handgun, except Sabrina's son, Marcy, who had been shot in the left eye. The gun was also found underneath Sabrina's body, as well as a knife. The bodies of the victims were removed from the property in the caskets Marcus had previously purchased. An officer at the scene said he had never seen anything like it in his 40 years of law enforcement, noting when you see children, small infants, who are being brought out of the house or in caskets, little coffins, will forever cause you to believe and think that there is evil in this world. Marcus Wesson is an evil person. While Marcus awaited trial, relatives sided with him and blamed the 2 young mothers for causing the tragic events of that day. His childhood friend, Charles H. Cox, also said he couldn't imagine Marcus killing anyone because he just wasn't that kind of guy. Not that people don't change or snap. I would just like to give him the benefit of the doubt. Family and friends dismiss allegations of a murder self-cancel pact, but Marcus himself remained silent, offering no explanation for what went down in that back bedroom on March 12th. Kiani and Rosie both blamed Sabrina. They claimed that the woman had become verbally and physically abused as soon as the police arrived. She then coerced 7 of the children and her sister, Elizabeth, into the back bedroom. Rosie said she saw Sabrina take out the gun from her bag before closing the door and killing everyone inside. The trial started in March of 2005 and lasted 3 months. Marcus pled not guilty, testifying that his daughter Sabrina had shot the children for removing herself from the earth. He claimed she was so fond of guns she carried cartridges in her purse and liked to play army, painting her face green and black like camouflage. Running the defense, Sabrina held the .22 caliber Ruger Mark II pistol to the eye of each child and squeezed the trigger before killing her sister Elizabeth and then finally herself. There is some evidence for this, as her DNA was found on the murder weapon, while Marcus's was not. However, the coroner's report stated the 2 sisters died an hour or 2 after the younger victims. The jury could neither confirm nor deny that Marcus had fired the shots. However, the prosecutor, Chief Deputy District Attorney Lisa Gamoyan, argued that if Marcus never pulled the trigger, he was still responsible for the murders as he manipulated his family. Prosecutor Gamoyan was noted saying, "In this family, he was Christ himself, the ultimate authority figure who determined life and death, but for his pact, for his teachings, none of this would have happened." As many as 50 witnesses took the stand, including Rosie and Kiani. Kiani read from her diary and said, "I love you, my daddy, always know that. I am deeply in love with you. I will never leave you." Rosie wore a gold wedding ring Marcus had given her and said that she still loved him, was happy to have been his wife. She also told the court that Marcus only bought the casket so he could use the wood for a renovation project. Marcus's son, Serafino Wesson, also testified in support of his father, telling the courtroom, "He's the best dad anybody could ever have." He expressed his disbelief that his father was the killer, stating, "He looks really dangerous, but he's such a gentle guy, I can't believe he did it." Marcus refused to take the stand. However, jurors were able to hear some of his words when transcripts of jailhouse conversations with his family were read out. In one, he tries to explain the electrical sounds in his head and was quoted saying, "I said, 'Lord, what is that?' And then he said that I had an angelic brain. I started laughing so hard I was losing faith in him." Trial ended on June 17, 2005, with Marcus being found guilty on 9 counts of first-degree murder, 14 counts of forcible essay of his nieces and 7 of his daughters. He was sentenced to death and put on death row at San Quentin State Prison. 6 years after the verdict, Marcus appealed his death sentence. His attorney, Mark Cutler, has represented dozens of death row inmates and has slowed down the death penalty process for all of them, keeping them alive for decades. It says Marcus Wesson's case will also last decades, long enough for the 64-year-old to die of natural causes as opposed to execution. As of the date of this recording, June of 2024, Marcus Wesson is 77 years old and is still sitting on death row. The Wesson family massacre horrified the community of Fresno, understandably so, and donations started to pour in to support the remaining children. A large memorial filled with flowers, balloons, and teddy bears was left outside the Wesson home in memory of the victims who lost their lives. Sabrina, Elizabeth, Marcy, Java, Illabel, Jonathan, Aviv, Sedona, and Ethan were all cremated on Wednesday, March 24, 2004 at Belmont Memorial Park in Fresno. Their ashes were kept by family members. Rosie sold 761 West Hammond Avenue in 2005 to TFS Investments. TFS Investments tore the property down in 2006 and sold it to the city's redevelopment agency in 2010. In 2012, the city approved the sale of the property for a new AutoZone store for $580,000, but the plan never went ahead. In 2016, the property was sold to the state of California for its high-speed rail project for $46,000. Marcus Wesson is regarded as one of Fresno's worst mass murderers and has been nicknamed the Vampire King of Fresno. Primetime launched a one-hour special surrounding the case called Family Secrets. In this documentary, Elizabeth Solario revealed she had divorced her husband of more than 30 years. She described the divorce as a symbolic closure from a man who had controlled her entire life since she was 8 years old. 5 of Marcus Wesson's surviving children appeared in the documentary and shared the pain they had endured under the constant control of their father. As part of the special, the family also returned to places where they lived with Marcus, who kept them isolated from the rest of the world. Elizabeth says the journey reminded her of the emotional scars she and her children will carry for the rest of their lives. Case 3. Many people have heard of the case we're going to talk about today, but there's a couple of important pieces of information that people often get wrong. The first is the belief that a horrific murder of a child under CPS oversight with a detailed history is an anomaly. That's sadly not the case. This is the story of Gabriel Fernandez. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005 in California to parents Arnold Contreras and Pearl Fernandez. The couple had a total of 4 children together, including little Gabriel. According to sources, Pearl abandoned her newborn at the hospital 3 days after he was born. Shortly after, Gabriel was placed in the care of Michael Lemos Carranza, his great-uncle on his mother's side, and his partner, David Martinez. In recent years, Gabriel Fernandez has become something of a household name thanks to LA Times reporter Garrett Thorolf, who risked everything to tell Gabriel's story. He came across Gabriel's name and age in a homicide docket and wondered why there wasn't any information on this boy. So he started digging, and he faced an incredible amount of pushback. Workers from inside LA County were afraid to go public due to the risk of losing their jobs or potentially facing criminal prosecution. But thankfully, one person was willing to come forward. And the information that we're about to cover is only possible thanks to Garrett and the whistleblower for coming forward, even despite the serious risk of doing so. In 2009, when Gabriel was 4 years old, he was placed into the custody of his grandparents due to his grandfather's objection to the boy being raised by 2 men in a relationship together. There had also been allegations that the couple had been assaying Gabriel. Although this has never proven to be true, it was possibly a ploy to remove the boy from their custody. Gabriel remained in his grandparents' care until 2012. Despite objections from the family regarding Gabriel's well-being, his mother Pearl and her new boyfriend Desaro Aguirre regained custody to gain welfare benefits. At the time, Gabriel was just 8 years old. Pearl Cynthia Fernandez was born on August 29, 1983 to parents Robert and Sandra Fernandez. She had a complicated upbringing with her father in and out of jail for the bulk of her childhood. Pearl claimed that her mother was a violent woman who did not love her. According to Pearl, she started drinking and using crystal by the age of 9, and by 11, she ran away from home. She never made it to high school, having dropped out by the time she was in 8th grade. Pearl claimed that her teenage years were rife with violence, as well as essay from her family members. For example, she claimed that as a teenager, her uncle had attempted to assault her, and that she had been held hostage for days by a gang who took turns on her. This led to a hospitalization and dark thoughts from Pearl, who confessed to dealing with ideation at this time. In 2011, Pearl took a cognitive ability test. She placed within the 3rd percentile in the verbal comprehension portion of the test, which was on par with a typical 2nd grade student. She was also diagnosed with a number of severe mental health issues, including a depressive disorder, an unnamed developmental disability, and a possible personality disorder, as well as PTSD. According to clinical psychologist Dr. Deborah Miura, Pearl was virtually unable to use thoughts to guide her behavior and control her emotional reactions. According to family members, including her own aunt, Elizabeth Carranza, Pearl had a difficult time accepting responsibility for her actions and enjoyed falsely portraying herself as a victim. She claimed that many of her romantic partners, including Nasaro, were violent with her, but according to her aunt, this simply was not the case. Pearl was the only one who was actually violent and controlling, and had pending charges for threatening to stab the father of her 4 children. She also had a problem with substance use, and enjoyed using oxycodone and Norco, both of which are opioids. Her boyfriend, Izaro Tony Aguirre, was born on June 13, 1980. The time of our story, Pearl and Izaro had been together about a year prior to regaining custody of Gabriel. Izaro had dropped out of school after being forced to repeat 2 grades, and was working as a caregiver and a driver at the Woodland Park Retirement Hotel. There, his coworkers referred to him by his nickname Shaggy. According to his former boss, Susan Weisbarth, Izaro was quiet, down-to-earth, nice person, always willing to help. He had worked for Woodland Park for 3 years, and was described as patient and loving, and would often change the adult diapers of elderly residents at the facility. Izaro was well loved by his residents. According to his coworker, Shirlene Mill, Izaro would often take scenic routes while driving his residents around, so they could check out views other than the California freeway. At the time of our story, Izaro was working as a security guard for AVL Private Security, where he was posted up at the Vallarta Market in Palmdale. Now, after hearing all of this, one would think that Izaro was just a huge teddy bear. That's what makes what happened next so shocking. Gabriel would go on to live with his mother and her boyfriend for a total of 8 months. During that time, young Gabriel would suffer unimaginable violence and torture at the hands of the couple. He was beaten regularly, which would result in his bones being broken. This included having his teeth knocked out with a baseball bat. He was covered in burn marks that were inflicted with an array of items, including lit cigarettes, lighters, and heated-up metal spoons. He was forced to consume cat litter, feces, spoiled or expired foods. And when he couldn't hold any of these items down, he was forced to eat his own vomit. Gabriel endured being pepper sprayed. He was forced to wear women's clothing to school. He was forced to take cold showers. He was shot repeatedly with a BB gun all over his body, including to his face and groin. To top it all off, Gabriel was forced to sleep bound and gagged in a small cupboard locked with a set of handcuffs. He didn't even have a real bed. According to Gabriel's siblings, Pearl and Izaro would laugh while being violent with a little boy. Allegedly, Gabriel was mistreated because Izaro believed that the 8-year-old liked boys. While in the cupboard, the only real food Gabriel had access to was pieces of banana that his siblings would give him in secret through the crack in the cupboard doors. During this time, Child Protective Services became involved in the couple's life due to the fact that Gabriel was going to school battered and bruised. This would include Barbara Dixon, a licensed marriage and family therapist from Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services. Barbara oversaw in-home counseling sessions for both Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, whom we'll discuss later in the story. Barbara believed Pearl when she told her that Gabriel's black eye and bruises on his ankles and wrists were the result of a bicycle accident. And even after she allegedly grew suspicious of the family, she never escalated the matter to the DCFS hotline, despite being a mandatory reporter. Now, it's also important to talk about a particular home visit that was conducted by the Antelope Valley Youth and Family Services that could have changed the course of things for little Gabriel. But unfortunately, the social worker didn't do her job either. She didn't even document any of Gabriel's injuries. Upon leaving the family home, Pearl presented the social worker with a series of notes that Gabriel had written, had messages on them indicating that he wanted to remove himself from this earth. Rather than taking them seriously, the social worker trusted Pearl's words that Gabriel was doing just fine, wasn't presenting any current signs of ideation, and wasn't a danger to himself or others. Things came to a head on May 22, 2023. Allegedly, Gabriel had failed to pick up his toys after he was done with them, which led to the couple beating him. Except this time, Gabriel wasn't breathing. Pearl called 911 and emergency services were dispatched to the couple's apartment located in a complex on East Avenue Q10 in Palmdale. First responders found Gabriel laying naked on the floor, covered in injuries. Rather than provide them with any useful information, Isaro again doubled down on insisting that the 8-year-old Gabriel liked boys. Gabriel was rushed to the Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where doctors declared the little boy brain dead. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez passed away 2 days later on May 24, 2013. At autopsy, his cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, neglect, and malnutrition. His manner of death was a homicide. Gabriel's body was later cremated, and his ashes were provided to his family members. Just a day prior on May 23rd, both Pearl Fernandez and Isaro Aguirre were arrested in connection with Gabriel's death and were charged with first-degree homicide with a special circumstance for torture. Prosecutors were quick to announce that they planned to seek the death penalty for both defendants. In a bid to avoid the death penalty, Pearl decided to take a plea deal on February 15, 2018. As part of the agreement, the death penalty would be removed from the table. Pearl would plead guilty in exchange for life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Isaro, on the other hand, decided to plead not guilty to his charges, and his case went to trial, prosecuted by both Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hadami and Deputy District Attorney Scott Young. Prosecutor Hadami will become something of a household name as our story progresses. Now, many felt that the prosecution should have classified Gabriel's death as a hate crime due to the fact that Isaro would often beat Gabriel because he thought that he liked boys. According to Prosecutor Hadami, they chose not to pursue a hate crime charge for strategic reasons. Jury selection began in September of 2017 and consisted of 7 women and 5 men. At trial, Isaro's attorney John Allen painted his client as a kind and compassionate man with a clean criminal record before meeting Pearl. While Prosecutor Hadami portrayed him as simply pure evil, he deserved the death penalty, even though it, and I quote, doesn't even compare to what he did to Gabriel. On November 14, 2017, the 12 jurors began their deliberations, which went on until the following afternoon. Ultimately, Isaro Aguirre was found guilty on all counts. The sentencing phase began December 11th of the same year. It appeared the jury was deadlocked, but on December 13th, they recommended capital punishment, and the judge accepted the recommendation. At their joint sentencing hearing on June 7, 2018, Pearl shared the following apology directed towards her family and children. But thankfully, Superior Court Judge George Lamelli wasn't moved and had harsh words for both Pearl and Isaro. I was privy to this case. I sat through it, and I heard the evidence. I was privy to the photographs, coroner's photographs, the extent of the injuries, and what have you. And this almost demands that comment be made about this case. It goes without saying that the conduct was horrendous, inhumane, and nothing short of evil. The repeated beatings, burning, starving, binding, shooting Gabriel with BBs that were embedded in different parts of his body, knocking his teeth out with a bat, locking him in a dark cabinet while he's bound, and starving this poor child. It is unimaginable the pain that this child probably endured. And from what I heard, Gabriel was a kind, loving individual who just wanted to be loved. And so, you want to say that the conduct was animalistic, but that would be wrong, because even animals know how to take care of their young, some to an extent that they will sacrifice their own lives in caring for their young. I remember saying years ago, a report on the news that, and this at least sent the point home to me about animals, and there was this cat who had given birth to illiterate cats, and the house where the kittens were in was on fire. And that's what I think had made the news, because the fire department was trying to put the fire out, but each time the mother went in to retrieve a kitten, and she would emerge from the house by the scruff, holding the kitten by the scruff, and would manage one by one to bring him or her to safety. And the last time, the house was lost, and the fire department tried to keep this cat from going into the house, but it managed to elude them, went into the house, and they thought, well, she's lost. And I never forgot thinking, she made it out of the house, she had the cat by the scruff, except that she was singed and burning her face. But the thing that really struck me was the cat was not blind. The intensity of the heat burned her eyes, but she never let go of that kitten. And so when you want to say first instinct is to say, you know what, this is animalistic. No, it's beyond animalistic, because animals know how to take care of their young. I can only wish, I really do, that you both, in the middle of night, you wake up and you think of the injuries that you subjected this poor young man, this poor 7-year-old, and that it tortures you. I rarely say that. It'll be a different type of torture, because you won't be in pain, physical pain. But I'm not sure that you're capable of doing that, but that's my wish. On June 13, 2018, Isara was transferred to San Quentin State Prison to await his execution. It should be noted that California Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on executions in 2019. There's even a federal court order prohibiting the practice in the state, which has been in place since 2006. The convicted can still be sentenced to death, but actual procedures are currently not being carried out. Many of California's condemned are simply dying of natural causes on death row, which include the likes of Charles Manson and the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. The spring of 2021, Isara Aguirre was transferred to the Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. On June 21, 2018, Pearl was transferred to the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. April 8, 2021, Pearl attempted to be resentenced. She claimed that due to new changes in California law, she wouldn't have been eligible for life without the possibility of parole if she were to be sentenced today. Thankfully, Superior Court Judge George Lamelli was having none of it, and after a careful review concluded that Pearl was not entitled to resentencing relief. According to sources, things haven't been going well for Pearl in prison, as her fellow inmates know exactly what she's done, and she's been getting her come-up-in, something that we surprisingly rarely see happen to perpetrators when we research these stories. Another thing that's rare to see in the cases that we cover are social service workers being held accountable for their actions when they fail the children they're supposed to be protecting. The social workers in charge of Gabriel's case, Stephanie Rodriguez and Patricia Clement, as well as their supervisors Kevin Baum and Gregory Merritt, stood accused of actually neglecting Gabriel and falsifying public records. In fact, Gabriel wasn't a little boy that simply fell through the cracks. People in his life were well aware of what was taking place with him. Several calls were placed to the CA hotline voicing concerns for Gabriel. In fact, Gabriel showed his injuries to family members, to a security guard at the Los Angeles County Welfare Office, and to mandated reporters at his school. The very first hotline call was placed by Jennifer Garcia, Gabriel's first-grade teacher. Jennifer quickly became concerned about the boy's safety after he confessed to getting whipped at home. Jennifer is the same teacher that found the note hidden in Gabriel's desk that read, "I love you, Mom, and Gabriel is a good boy." After Jennifer's call, caseworker Rodriguez was assigned to Gabriel's case, but the violence suffered by the first grader just seemed to be getting worse. Jennifer watches Gabriel came to her classroom with a fat lip and patches of missing hair, all of which she claimed were inflicted by Pearl. He confessed to her that he'd been repeatedly shot with a BB gun, and as a result, Jennifer kept calling the hotline, except nothing would ever come of her calls. Anytime a social worker would conduct a home visit, they'd only speak with Pearl. They never had eyes on Gabriel, and there was never any medical follow-up. Gabriel should have been brought to a CA medical hub for examination, but he wasn't. Gabriel's great-aunt Elizabeth Carranza called the hotline on 3 separate occasions and tried to get the sheriff's office to intervene twice. Security guard Arturo Miranda Martinez risked the possibility of losing his job to report Gabriel's injuries to a 911 operator, but again, nothing was done. Due to their gross negligence, the social workers and their supervisors were fired and charged with CA and falsifying public records, both of which are felonies and could have landed all parties in prison for 11 years. At trial, Barbara Dixon, the therapist from Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services, who provided in-home counseling services to Gabriel, was granted immunity for her testimony. We'll touch more on Barbara later in our story because Barbara, in my opinion, didn't deserve immunity. As you'll find out later, Gabriel would not be the last child who would die from her negligence. Sadly, the CA charges were dropped in 2020 by California's 2nd District Court of Appeals due to lack of probable cause. Apparently, they felt that failure to uphold their duties and failure to remove Gabriel from his prison did not constitute criminal liability. This is sadly something we see quite often. The fact is that it's not a crime to be at your job, even when the lives of children are on the line. 9 sheriff's deputies were internally disciplined for their failure to properly investigate the allegations of violence against Gabriel. It's unclear if anyone was fired, but no one was held legally liable, even when they tried to interfere with the investigation. Many in California have done their best to keep Gabriel's name alive. There's a memorial tree standing outside of his East Avenue Q10 apartment complex, which is adorned with pictures of Gabriel, stuffed animals, and candles. Many murals depicting the first grader have popped up in his community, including one in Pacoima, where he attended school for 2 years. Sadly, on September 17, 2014, Gabriel's great-uncle, Michael Lemos Carranza, passed away. He was only 46 years old and never got to see justice for his sweet nephew. On July 14, 2020, Michael's partner, David Martinez, passed away due to complications from the pandemic. After Michael's death, David had been deported by ICE to his native El Salvador, a country he hadn't lived in for 38 years. According to prosecutor Hadami, he should have been allowed to stay in the U.S. Very, very unfair. David's funeral was held on July 16, 2020, the same day California's 2nd District Court of Appeals threw out the case against the social workers. Now it's clear that the social workers and the sheriff's deputies dodged a bullet here, especially with the public pressure to hold them accountable. And regardless of what you believe their intentions were, you would think child welfare in Los Angeles County would not want this level of heat on them again. After all, the entire country was watching them now. But the next case we're about to cover is going to make you think that none of this could possibly be real. Because LA County had another boy come across their radar, whose case looked virtually identical to Gabriel's, right down to the BB gun wounds. You would think that now they would actually take a case like this seriously, but sadly, that's not what happened. Anthony Nolan Avalos was born on May 4, 2008 in Los Angeles, California. As of the date I'm sharing this story with you all, he should have been approaching his 17th birthday. He was born to parents, Heather Maxine Barron and Victor Avalos, who were both teenagers. He was also the big brother to 6 half-siblings. Soon after Anthony was born, Victor, who was a construction worker, had to take off to Mexico. Victor was able to keep in contact through video calls, but Heather had a difficult time making ends meet at her part-time job at a local Subway. She went on to live with Anthony and later his other siblings in a cluttered, chaotic apartment off of Challenger Way in Lancaster, California. According to his aunt, Maria Barron, he was very loving and always wanted to cuddle. He was a hard worker. Dancing was something he always enjoyed. He loved watching football with his Uncle David. He loved the Cowboys. He loved going to the park. He was good at playing video games. He always enjoyed eating papooses when his mama would make them for him. His mother, Heather, didn't have the greatest start in life. She grew up with 2 older siblings named Crystal and David. After her mother, Wendy, left her father when she was just 4, she married a man named Roger Brown, an ex-con she'd been pen pals with when he was still serving his sentence. Wendy told the kids that he had been incarcerated for robbery, but the truth came out soon enough. Now, according to Heather, she and her sisters were repeatedly essayed by their stepfather. You'd think after what she and her sister endured, Heather would have kept her son away from him, but she didn't. Allegedly, Heather would leave Anthony with Roger from time to time. She said she wasn't worried about Anthony's safety because, and these are her words, he preferred girls to boys. As it turned out, she was wrong about that. When Anthony was just 4 years old, his mother brought him to a health clinic after he claimed that someone in the family had been touching him in an inappropriate manner. The visit resulted in the first of many calls to the CA hotline. DCFS records indicated that investigators concluded the incident had occurred, but they did not set up ongoing supervision or counseling after assurances from Anthony's mother that she would find him help and keep him away from the person that was hurting him. After he turned 6, his Aunt Crystal told her therapist that Heather was beating her nephew and locking him in a room with no access to food or a bathroom. Being a mandated reporter, the therapist called the hotline on April 29, 2014 to report what had been shared with her. A call was taken seriously and DCFS became involved. Anthony verified the account to a caseworker who interviewed him at his school. Further interviews revealed that his mother had not gotten him counseling, and due to this, Anthony began acting inappropriately with another child, which experts have found is not uncommon with child victims of SA. Furthermore, his siblings told them that Heather was beating him. Caseworkers believed that there was neglect in the home, and they referred the family to the department's voluntary family maintenance program. Under this program, children can stay with their families while they work to resolve issues. The program is designed for low-risk cases as a means to reduce the number of children in foster care. However, caseworkers placed Anthony into the program even though he was considered a high-risk case. There is often no judicial oversight or an attorney to represent the child's best interests, which is a huge problem. Gabriel Fernandez had actually been placed in this exact same program despite being considered also very high risk. One of the caseworkers assigned to Anthony was Matthew Mansfield, a veteran DCFS supervisor, who also played a role in Gabriel's placement in the voluntary program. In Anthony's case, Mansfield and colleague Mark Millman brought in counselors from the Children's Center of the Antelope Valley to provide services for Heather and her kids. This was the same agency that didn't take Gabriel Fernandez's notes seriously. According to Counselor Luis Ramirez, based solely on the information provided by Ms. Barron, the assessor believes that her capacity to provide suitable care for her children is severely limited by her poor parenting skills, poor judgment, and denial and lack of awareness of her mental health issues. Now, according to relatives, Heather had a history of depression, possibly even postpartum. She would have crying spells, complaints of feeling empty and lost, and seemed incapable of connecting with her children. But these weren't just normal blues. Heather had violent bursts of aggression that seemed to be on a hairpin trigger. She would hit the children with whatever object was close by, a wooden spoon, a ping-pong paddle, belts, shoes, or a hanger. Allegedly, when confronted by her siblings about the rampant mistreatment of her kids, Heather pretty much told them that what she did to punish her kids was her business. But despite having these types of mental health and emotional issues, Heather continued to have more children. By now, she was 24 with 4 kids, and she was pregnant again. Caseworkers in Los Angeles County weren't taking what Anthony was going through seriously. They refused to remove him from Heather's care, even after the 6-year-old wrote a note threatening to remove himself from the earth. This is exactly what happened with Gabriel Fernandez. And what's more, there were warning signs that were exactly identical to Gabriel's, such as appearing in school with facial wounds from a BB gun, and finally, after telling his teacher that his mother was hurting him. Wendy Wright, another counselor at the Children's Center who spent significant time with Anthony and his mother, called the hotline on October 14, 2014, to report that Heather grabbed one of Anthony's siblings violently and dragged him across the room. She consistently talked about her children in derogatory terms and displayed nothing but anger towards them. Ms. Wright told the hotline operator that Mark Millman was slow to respond to her phone calls and did not seem to take action when she finally reached him. Her call was later dismissed as unsubstantiated. I saw nothing but anger towards those children, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. She showed absolutely no affection towards any of them. Even the 2 weeks. At that time the baby was 2 weeks old. Okay, she seemed completely detached. Shane Bulkley, another DCFS worker who was assigned to investigate Wendy Wright's report, wrote in his notes that Heather cursed, yelled, and acknowledged hitting her kids with a belt. He quoted Mark Millman as saying, "Given the children and their age and their behavior, she's doing all she can." However, both Shane Bulkley and Mark Millman later declined to comment on that particular statement. On November 5, 2014, yet another therapist at the Children's Center, named Crystal G, called the hotline to report that one of the children told her, "Mommy whoops our asses." Mark Millman did follow up with Ms. G, but the conversation was brief at best. Now, we've mentioned in previous episodes a scoring system that DCFS uses to rate the children that enter their program. The Voluntary Family Maintenance Program was supposed to service low-risk cases, despite Anthony being considered high-risk and Gabriel Fernandez as very high. Well, Anthony was evaluated once more, and yet again scored high, and a recommendation for increased supervision was given. However, Shane Bulkley and his supervisor overruled the recommendation and closed the investigation, saying they did not have evidence to substantiate the allegations. At the close of 2014, Mark Millman and his supervisor, Matthew Mansfield, took the Children's Center off the case and enlisted a new agency, Hathaway Sycamore Child and Family Services, which again had provided similar services to Gabriel Fernandez through its counselor, Barbara Dixon. It's unclear why the switch was made, and Crystal G considered her removal and its timing to be odd. Now, Barbara Dixon probably wasn't the best fit for Anthony's case either, as she had completely failed Gabriel prior. It should be noted how she talked about her role in Gabriel's case when she testified in court. In 2017, during the criminal case against Gabriel's caseworkers, she claimed she witnessed extensive injuries, but withheld the information from the hotline, despite a state law requiring her to report all suspected violence. In exchange for her testimony, she was granted immunity. She was still allowed to keep her job and manage cases of children who clearly were in need of intervention. To no surprise, she was also no help to Anthony. After she was assigned to his case, the focus of Barbara's counseling to reduce the dysfunction in the family was directed at Anthony, not Heather. Her case notes show that she counseled him to listen to his mother more attentively and to finish his homework. I wonder if she'd tell a battered woman that she wouldn't get hit if she didn't burn dinner. I digress. Barbara's notes spanning from February of 2015 to January of 2016, when Anthony was ages 6 and 7, depicted him as prone to whining, crying, and tantrums, and she said this made parenting him difficult. But Barbara wasn't even taking proper notes to document Anthony's case. For example, some of her notes were cut and pasted from one session to the next, and they did not mention the new allegations that arrived at the hotline during the time she worked with the family. She, of course, has declined to comment on that fact. In April of 2015, Heather's brother David introduced her to Kareem Ernesto Leyva, a co-worker of his at a Santa Clarita shipping facility. The two began a relationship that would span years and eventually produce more children. But we should talk for a moment about who fathered who in the Baron Leyva household, as it is somewhat confusing. As we mentioned previously, Anthony's father was Victor Avalos. His middle siblings were born to two different fathers, none of whom stuck around. The youngest were all born to Kareem. The family of 10 all lived together in a 3-unit at the Village Point Apartments off of East Avenue K in Lancaster. Within months of their introduction, the father of one of Heather's younger children told police that Kareem was hurting his son. On April 27, 2015, Sheriff's Deputy Elijah Goffigan interviewed the boy, then 2 years old, who told him that his mother's boyfriend had violently grabbed him by the ear, leaving it bruised and cut. The deputy wrote that he saw the wounds himself. When Sheriff's Detective Chris Wyatt got the report, he made no attempt whatsoever to find Kareem and recommended no charges, and thus ended the investigation. DCFS workers also did not locate and interview Kareem at any point over the 3 years they investigated the family, even though they suspected he was at the home regularly on nights and weekends. They also did not follow the department's rules requiring them to contact his other children or their mothers. If they had, or if they had pulled court records, they would have seen that 2 other women had restraining orders against him after they separately told judges that Kareem beat them with their children present. It was also clear that Kareem hadn't changed his ways because as the relationship progressed, Heather told caseworkers that he began manhandling her as well. DCFS opened a case in dependency court for the sibling, but not for Anthony and the other children in the home. Soon thereafter, one of the assigned DCFS caseworkers, Anna Scortino, saw visible marks and bruises on the sibling's face and left arm, which Heather claimed were due to a fall in the shower. On June 12, 2015, Ms. Scortino called the hotline and stated that she doubted the claim, but wanted it recorded, as she put it, to cover our butts. The case was later closed as unsubstantiated. DCFS guidelines, nevertheless, required the allegation to be sent to police for a criminal investigation. The assignment went to Sheriff's Deputy Billy Cox, who had been disciplined in the past for failing to properly investigate an unrelated CA allegation. According to Deputy Cox, he never contacted Heather or Kareem. He stated it was routine and common practice that if a referral was called in by a social worker, that we basically rubber-stamped it, so to speak, and sent it through. By September of 2015, Anthony was enrolled at Lincoln Elementary School in Lancaster, California. In talking with Anthony, Vice Principal Gia Groh had become increasingly concerned. He told Ms. Groh that his mother beat him and locked him in a room with no access to food, water, or a bathroom. He shared that his mother's boyfriend forced him to kneel on uncooked rice and pushed on his knees as he knelt so that he would bleed. He also described what he called the captain's chair, which was a form of discipline that required him to hold a squatted position for a long period of time with his arms outstretched. Appalled by what Anthony shared, she called the hotline on September 18th. A little boy told me today that he moved out of his home and into his aunt's home. He and his brothers and sisters because his mom was hitting them and locking them up in their room for long hours. I'm thanking them, putting them to do captain's chairs in the corner. Okay, what is that, captain's chair? He demonstrated it for me where he has to put his back up against the wall and kneel down like bend down. So it's like, it's a thigh strengthening exercise, but it could also be considered like discipline. He's making a child do that for a long time. Okay, they're hurting their thighs. Okay, and you said locking them up where? in their room for hours on end, and so the aunt went and took them. Okay, they've now gone to go visit the aunt. Around the same time, Anthony's uncle, David Barron, heard the same alarming stories from the children during a visit to his home. They told him about being locked in a room. They said Kareem also ordered the captain's chair punishment. Additionally, the children said that Kareem whipped their faces and legs with a belt and dangled Anthony's younger half-brother upside down from a staircase. When Heather came to pick up her children, David and his wife, Maria, physically blocked her from taking them and called 911. Sheriff's deputy, Michael Gallardo, responded and called the hotline to report what had happened. According to Deputy Gallardo, they seemed pretty shaken up when I talked to them about it. I sat in and talked with a couple of the kids, and a couple of the kids have told me some things that make me not want to release them right now. I'm not going to release them. Basically, they're saying that the guy, Kareem, that I referred to earlier, he's been pretty physically abusive to him. Hit him with belts in the face, hit him with belts on the legs. He's put him in a seated squat position against the wall for tons of time on end. He locked him in the bedroom. Apparently, he held the youngest by his ankles over the flight of stairs, and that wasn't even from us. That was from somebody who gave me that information. I tend to believe the kids. They seemed pretty shaken up when I talked to them about it. Mom, at this point, says she's willing to leave them here with brother. Brother is willing to have them stay here. Okay, so that's where I'm at. Okay, so you're leaving them with the brother for how long? I guess until you guys come out and do that referral that you guys have open right now, that 5-day referral. Next day, David called the hotline himself. He told the operator that the children confided that they had been locked in a room for so long that they urinated and defecated on themselves. Their mother's boyfriend got angry. They said he threw dirty diapers at them, slammed them into walls, and dragged one of Anthony's half-brothers by the ear, leaving it scabbed and bruised. He stated that the children were so hungry that they had been hoarding food. When asked how long this has been going on for, the children could be heard in the background responding, 1,000 weeks. David told the hotline worker that Heather was hurting herself around the children and saying that she hates life, and noted that he had pictures of her hurting herself and saying that she wanted to remove herself from the earth. He also told the operator that Kareem was a member of the MS-13 gang and that he was afraid of what he would do next. He said Kareem dragged them on the floor. He slammed them to the floor, like he'd pick them up and throw them on the floor. Are they like rough playing, or is he doing this intentionally to cause harm? He's doing it. He's admitted he doesn't like the kids, so he just treats them like crap, just because he doesn't like them, because he's too hyper and stuff. So he locks them in the rooms, and he's grabbing them by his ankles, because they have a 2-story house, and he would hang them upside down by his ankles and start shaking them, like, "Oh, I'm going to drop you if you don't stop." And I was thinking if he slipped one time, that would kill the baby, the kids. Okay, when did all of this happen? We just found out about it, but I guess it's been going on for months now. And my sister and him said if they would tell anybody, that they would be in a lot of trouble. And then when I saw the bruises, I asked what happened, and he told me. So I separated the kids, and I asked each one individually, so that way they can just say the same story. And they all told me the same exact thing. He wouldn't feed them until mommy came home. He would give them cold showers, and then, do you know what an Indian burn is? No. Is that like a carpet? No, it's like you grab somebody's arms, and you just start twisting your arms really hard. Oh, okay. And he was doing that to them also, and then throwing dirty diapers at their heads. So your sister and Kareem stated that if they told anyone, they would be in trouble? Yes. And then after he told us, we let my sister know, do you know that Kareem's abusing your child? And she's like, no, it's not true. And then when she took her home, she kept telling her, you need to say it's not true, it's not true. And she said, I'm not going to lie. I need to tell the police the truth, because we told them we were going to tell the cops. And so she grounded and locked her in the room, and didn't let her come out until the next day. DCFS caseworker Ikea Vernon met with Anthony at his aunt and uncle's home. He told her everything. He also told her that Heather is my old mom. This is my new house. I am part of the Barron family now. I'm never going to see Heather again. She locks us up in our rooms and makes us starving. Ms. Vernon then called Barbara Dixon and 2 other Hathaway Sycamore counselors who had been working in the home for 7 months. They were supportive of Heather's parenting during the discussion. According to Ms. Vernon's case notes, each service provider reported that he had never heard anything from the children about violence and neglect. Ikea Vernon had just recently joined the department. Her notes indicated that she was unwilling to draw a conclusion based solely on what the children had told her. When David and Maria Barron showed up at the DCFS office for answers about the investigation, Ms. Vernon turned them away and told them they could get information only from Anthony's mother. The couple left unaware that they could have filed a formal petition to ask the court to intervene. Still in possession of her parental rights, Heather brought her kids home during the last week of September 2015. According to Ikea Vernon, she met with Anthony at Lincoln Elementary, where he shared with her that his mother was starting to be nice, and that she does a new thing where she does not lock the bedroom door anymore. Months later, Anthony and his siblings recanted their allegations against Heather and Kareem. In December 2015, Ikea Vernon marked the allegations from Gia Groh, Deputy Gallardo, and David Barron as unsubstantiated. She also used a computer system to score the family's risk, and it once again rated it as high and recommended a greater level of intervention. Ms. Vernon and her supervisor, however, decided against taking any further action. She later stated that her decision relied on the children recanting their prior claims and was unaware that victims often retract their accounts. The following month, Barbara Dixon and Hathaway Sycamores ended their work with the family. But this would not be the last time that DCFS was involved in the Barron-Leva household. On April 28, 2016, Mildred Blue, a teacher providing services to Heather at a battered women's shelter, reported to the hotline that her children arrived with bruises and said that Kareem had forced them to fight each other at home. They also appeared hungry, with one of the children eating out of the trash. Again, the children denied the allegation when interviewed by DCFS caseworkers, who in turn decided that based on the children's word, there was no need to follow up. Sheriff's Deputy Billy Cox also received a report of Ms. Blue's hotline call. He too decided not to follow up. In doing so, Deputy Cox violated his department's own policy, which requires detectives to conduct independent investigations of CA and not rely solely on DCFS's reports, even if DCFS claims it is unsubstantiated. Near the end of 2016, at least one more call to the hotline arrived regarding Anthony's family. But there were little to no details other than the fact that caseworkers marked it as unsubstantiated once again. Between February 28, 2013 and November 2, 2016, 12 calls were made to the hotline regarding the family, and Anthony and his siblings still remained in their mother's care. Around this time, Heather cut ties with her brother David, her sister Crystal, her sister-in-law Maria, and the educators who made claims against her. As with many cases we've covered where parents facing multiple accusations of CA end up pulling their kids from school, Heather moved Anthony to El Dorado Elementary, where they had no idea about his prior history as a victim. There, he got to know his new 4th grade teacher, Harmony Bell. Anthony was the fastest runner in his 4th grade class. He earned a place on the honor roll, and his teacher noticed an uncommon emotional maturity for a boy his age. He often collected his thoughts before speaking, asking if he could step out of the room to take a few deep breaths. When a new student joined the class, he asked to move to a neighboring seat, hoping to be the friend the newcomer needed. According to Ms. Bell, Anthony was often nervous about something. He held his Bible tightly throughout the day, once quaking with tears when it fell to the floor. On the last day of school, Anthony wrote a letter. It read, "Dear Mrs. Bell, thank you for teaching me everything you could. It was such a blessing to meet you. I just hope that when I'm going to 6, that you can come to New Vista, so I can see you still. I hope that you can come to my high school, middle school, and college. That way, we will see each other for school years without a problem because how close we are and how we are best buddies, friends. I just want to stay with you forever, but I can't. I just hope you have a good rest of your life because you already know that I'm going to have a good life. Love, Anthony Avalos, your friend." Mrs. Bell wrote in his report card, "Anthony absolutely amazes me. He is so kind and considerate to others, arrives on time, keeps a smile on my face all day long. I can't imagine my class without him." But the summer of 2018 wasn't going to be full of trips to the beach, and Anthony wasn't going to make it to the 6th grade or see Ms. Bell ever again. On June 18th, Anthony allegedly confided to his mother that he liked boys, something that his Aunt Maria would later state took great courage for Anthony to do while living in the home and only reinforced how brave he was. Heather would later go on to tell a DCFS caseworker that Kareem overheard this conversation. The following night, Kareem dropped Anthony on his head repeatedly. In addition, he was whipped with a belt and a cord, slammed into furniture, starved, had hot sauce poured down his throat, and was not allowed to use the bathroom. On June 20th, 2018, Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies responded to a 911 call from Heather at about 12:15 in the afternoon. They found Anthony inside the apartment. He was not responding. The deputies were told that he had suffered injuries from a fall, and paramedics rushed him to the Antelope Valley Hospital in grave condition. Anthony's Aunt Maria learned of Anthony's condition and went to the hospital, where she found Heather in the hallway. When Heather hesitated to let her see her nephew, Maria crouched her feet on her hands and knees on the linoleum floor to plead with her to please allow her to see Anthony. Through tears, she told Heather she was sorry for reporting her to DCFS, anything that she could do to get inside and see him. When Heather finally relented, Maria found Anthony unconscious and breathing on a ventilator. His lifeless face was held by a large yellow neck brace. Sensors were taped around his skull, recording his diminished brain activity. He was 4 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 77 pounds. His tiny body was covered in cuts, bruises, and cigarette burns. He was so malnourished and dehydrated that his veins were collapsing. He forced emergency personnel to drill into his tibia to administer N4. He had a brain bleed and had suffered a traumatic brain injury. Due to the results of his injuries, Anthony Nolan Avalos died hours later on June 21st, 2018. He was just 10 years old. Sadly, it took Anthony dying for DCFS to do anything about the horror going on inside his mother's home. As a result, his 6 other siblings were finally removed from Heather's care. 29-year-old Heather Barron and 32-year-old Kareem Leyva were arrested on June 20th, 2018, and charged with 1 count of homicide and 1 count of torture with regard to Anthony, and 1 count of CA in the alleged beating of one of Anthony's younger brothers. Kareem was also charged with an additional count of CA, resulting in death. Some sources claim that the two were denied bail. Others state they had a bail set at $2 million each. On the day of Anthony's death, Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hadami and a couple of Sheriff's Department homicide detectives spent 2 hours combing through Heather's apartment searching for clues. What Prosecutor Hadami saw made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. They found blood stains on a carpet. They discovered locks on the outside of the children's bedroom doors. There was a leather belt and a bloodied hamper and telltale bottles of hot sauce on the table, right next to Anthony's bed. Under a bit of loose carpet in a corner, they discovered a pile of uncooked rice. During her interrogation at the LA County Sheriff's Special Victims Bureau in Lancaster, Prosecutor Hadami said he experienced an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. At 5 feet 2 inches, 160 pounds, with black hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, Heather looked like someone he became familiar with 5 years earlier, Pearl Fernandez. There were other similarities as well. Both women were intelligent and highly manipulative, even while being grilled by law enforcement. Heather tried to take control of her own interrogation. She would ask questions instead of answering them. She demanded to know what the investigators knew. She had a calculating way of turning a question over in her mind before she answered back, always insisting that she was the victim. According to Prosecutor Hadami, she was Pearl Fernandez. The couple were subsequently indicted by a Los Angeles County grand jury in October of 2018. At trial, Anthony's 8-year-old sister and his 7-year-old brother gave a chilling testimony. The brother shared that he was forced to wrestle Anthony until he hurt him, sometimes with his mother and Kareem watching them. He told investigators that the children would have to fight one another to escape punishment, and that eating was a privilege that they had to earn. If they urinated while they were in a locked room, Kareem would push their face into the puddle, and sometimes he'd stuff a shirt into their mouths to muffle the screams. The sister shared a similar story. She stated that Kareem would also make the kids beat each other up. She said, so the boys would be in trouble, so Kareem would have me and my other brother beat up Anthony, or me and Anthony beat up my other brother. Kareem would have us pinch him or sock him. She also shared that they were made to stand in a corner for hours after returning home from school. Sometimes we'd go in the hallway, the little wall between my room and my mom's room. We would have to go there on our knees and carry books, and with 2 weights on top tied all together, we would have to hold it for 10 minutes. If the books fell, she alleged they were made to start over for another hour. She claimed that her mom and Kareem would punish them by making them kneel on rice, and that Kareem sometimes used his foot to put pressure on their knees, causing them to bleed. Afterward, she said she was forced to clean it up. Evidence also showed they were hit with power cords, vacuum tubes, as well as fists. She went on to say that food often was withheld as punishment, and that after the boys were caught sneaking out for food, an alarm was placed on their bedroom door. The boys were also allegedly forbidden from exiting the room to leave the bathroom, which led to further punishment if they soiled themselves. She said that Kareem would hold their legs, make them lay down, and put their face into the urine. The word is alleged that over the last 5 or 6 days of his life, Anthony suffered a slew of punishments, both quick and prolonged. Punishments that, in addition to kneeling on rice for lengthy periods, included having hot sauce poured on his face and mouth, and being whipped with a belt on his body, legs, butt, and the bottom of his feet, as well as being repeatedly held upside down and dropped on his head. On March 6, 2019, a verdict in Heather Barron and Kareem Leiva's trial was reached. The decision was announced by Superior Court Judge Sam Oda the following afternoon. Both were found guilty of first-degree homicide, with special circumstances involving infliction of torture. The court finds defendant Kareem Ernesto Leiva guilty of first-degree murder under a theory of torture murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Subdivision A. The court also finds the special circumstance allegation against defendant Leiva pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, Subdivision A, Paragraph 18, to be true. The court finds defendant Heather and Maxine Barron guilty of first-degree murder under a theory of torture murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187, Subdivision A. The court also finds the special circumstance allegation against defendant Barron pursuant to Penal Code Section 190.2, Subdivision A, Paragraph 18, to be true. On this count, defendant Leiva's guilt is primarily established inter alia through the medical evidence presented in the trial, including trial testimony of doctors, photographic and documentary exhibits, defendant Leiva's own admissions made on September 27, 2018, defendant Leiva's flight from the apartment when 911 was called on June 20, 2018, defendant Leiva's self-infliction of harm to himself, slashing his own neck, observed at his interview on June 27, 2018, the in-court trial testimony, and the various taped interviews ranging from June 20, 2018 to June 28, 2018. At sentencing 4 years later, Heather and Kareem looked on as several of Anthony's grieving family members delivered emotional victim impact statements. The first initial of the last name is O, and she's with her family members. "It's okay, honey, you can stand right here. And you can open it if you want or you can read it, whatever you want. You tell the judge whatever you want to say. Take your time. It's okay. How about this? Why don't you have other people go so that you can see how it goes? And then if she wishes to make the statement herself, she could do so. There's no wrong or right way to do it. It's just your way and that's okay. That's okay. Whatever way you want to do it is the way you're going to do it. You want to talk? Okay. First initial of the last name is P, Your Honor, Anthony's cousin. And you can hold this if you want. Maria can help you too. He's up there, and you can tell the judge whatever you want. Okay. Do you have his paper? You mean he doesn't have it memorized? I could read the paper. Okay. Okay. Dear Judge, my name is... I am 8 years old, and I miss my cousin Anthony. I was a baby when I last saw him. I wish I could remember all our time together, but all I have is pictures and stories that my family tells me. Anthony was in a Mason company full of life and love. He always played with me and made me laugh. I have family, and I have a video that I like to play over and over of him making me laugh when I was little. We never got to see Anthony grow up. I will never get to play with my older cousin. He will get to teach me how to play baseball or play catch with him. Heather, who's supposed to be my aunt, took Anthony away from us. Heather is an evil monster, and she deserves to spend the rest of her life in prison. I don't forgive Heather for taking my cousin's life, and I hope she gets beat up in jail because I just wanted to meet Anthony. I hope Heather has a horrible life. Anthony is in a better place, and someday we'll be together again, and we will be able to make new memories. I always carry you in my heart, Anthony. Love you, and miss you very much. Thank you for your time, Honor. Thank you. It has been 5 long years without my brother, my best friend, and my whole world. Anthony was everything to me and my family. Anthony was a ball of sunshine to everyone, and sadly, because of these 2 monsters, he is not here anymore. Anthony did not deserve any of the things that happened to him nor me. I am a 13-year-old girl. I should not have to be here doing all this. I should be able to live a normal life. They both took away my ability to live a normal life as a normal girl. Sometimes I wish I could turn back time and speak up to anyone, but I can't. Sometimes I wish that I could turn back time and speak up to a teacher or anyone at least, but I can't. I wish that Maria never introduced him to you or us. Heather, you and Kareem ruined not only Anthony's life but mine, Robert's, Bella's, Noah's, David's, Priscilla's, Evelyn's, and even your own lives. You decided to choose and live. You decided to choose and live a man over us, your own children. You decided to let that horrible man into our lives, and that ruined everything. You stopped loving and protecting us, and that hurts a lot. Kareem, you came into our life and ruined everything. I don't know why you did it, but you did. You tortured us and hurt us very badly. If it wasn't for you, Anthony would still be here and none of us would have to be here doing this. It is also because of Heather that Anthony is not here anymore. She did not do her job as a mother. She did not protect us and took part in the torture. I would have never thought in a million years that I would have wanted to call my own mother Mom. To me, you are both monsters, and Heather, you are not my mother nor family. If I knew that the abuse would have ended with me losing my brother, I would have said something, but I didn't because I was not scared, but because I was scared and terrified. But I'm not anymore because this is all finally coming to an end, and you both would get what has been waiting for you. I have learned to accept that you guys can't hurt me anymore. I'm finally free from all the torture, but if I were to have known that this would end with me losing a brother, I would do it all over again with just one difference, that it would be me, not Anthony. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. And what about Barbara Dixon? Well, the California State Board of Behavioral Sciences placed Barbara Dixon on 4 years of probation. She faced charges of gross negligence and unprofessional conduct by the licensing board, but sadly, those charges were dropped. Her probation went into effect on March 31st, 2022. This means that in 2026, Barbara Dixon is free to fail children in Los Angeles once more. On April 25th, 2023, Heather Maxine Barron and Kareem Ernesto Leyva were sentenced to life in prison. Both were denied probation and ordered to pay $7,500 in victims' compensation funds. They had initially faced the death penalty, but Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaskin had said his office would no longer seek capital punishment after he won his 2020 election. In addition, Anthony's father Victor and his siblings received a settlement of $32 million in damages from Los Angeles County. Heather is currently being housed at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, the same location that houses Pearl Fernandez, while Kareem is being held at the Mule Creek State Prison in Ione. It should also be noted that in the wake of Anthony's death, his family, along with prosecutor Jonathan Hadami, held protests with the intention to oust DA Gaskin due to his inability to put victims and their families first. Protests were held in Sam Yellen Park in Palmdale, as well as Schooner Patio Grill in Lancaster. In addition to Anthony's family and prosecutor Hadami, the family of Gabriel Fernandez was also in attendance. Anthony's funeral service was held at St. Junipero Serra Parish in Quartz Hills, California on July 20, 2018. His father Victor served as a pallbearer. He was laid to rest in a small blue casket at the Good Shepherd Catholic Cemetery in Lancaster, California. His headstone engraved with the image of a sleeping angel for the inscription, "You don't have to have superpowers to be a superhero." Now, you would think this would be the end of the video. Surely LA County couldn't let this happen again, right? But it didn't take long before they did let it happen again. And despite a mountain of evidence and the incredible work from one social worker who tried her very best to save this next boy's life, LA County was content to let him die. And as a further insult, remove the social worker from the case, the only person who was trying to save his life. After everything that happened with Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, it's reasonable for you to believe that this just couldn't happen again, especially in such a short span of time. But what you're about to find out is that it is far more horrifying than that. Noah Alejandro Cuatro was born on August 20th, 2014 in Palmdale, California to parents Ursula Elaine Juarez and Jose Maria Cuatro Jr. The pair met at John F. Kennedy High School in Granada Hills and had their first son when Ursula was 18 years old. Noah was born 2 years later, followed by a daughter and another son. From very early on, the couple had already wrapped up a long history with social services. In fact, LA County DCFS had their eyes on the family before Noah was even born. In 2014, Ursula was accused of harming her infant half-sister, causing skull fractures. Oftentimes, skull fractures in infants and toddlers point to shaken baby syndrome. DCFS social worker Jennifer Montano wasn't going to allow Ursula to have another opportunity to harm another child. She launched a full investigation and knew that Ursula was pregnant again. As such, she arranged to have Noah taken away from his parents as soon as he was born. During the first few weeks of his life, Noah bounced from foster home to foster home and never formed the bond that newborns have with their mothers. Later, it became obvious that didn't develop any motherly feelings towards her son. However, she was already accused of harming her half-sister, so there was a very good possibility that she would have hurt Noah even if the two had bonded. After a few weeks of bouncing around in the foster care system, Noah was placed in the temporary custody of his great-grandmother, Evangelina Hernandez, who he would go on to stay with for 9 months. He was a capable, responsible, and loving caregiver. Noah formed perhaps the most enduring bond of his entire life while staying with Evangelina, sometimes calling his great-grandmother Mommy. Evangelina was getting him to all his doctor's appointments and kept him clean and well-fed. She made sure he had plenty of age-appropriate toys and enriching activities throughout the day. Noah was thriving in her care. However, like many of the narcissistic parents we cover, Ursula and Jose wanted nothing more than to sabotage their son's life. They felt that DCFS had robbed them of the first months of caring for their son. When DCFS couldn't find concrete proof that Ursula was responsible for her half-sister's skull fracture, the investigation was determined to be inconclusive and Noah was returned to his parents. Evangelina Hernandez expressed concerns about the reunification between Noah and his parents. His great-grandmother didn't feel like they were ready to take care of their son, but her concerns didn't seem to count for much. So one would think that once Ursula and Jose got their son back, all would be sunshine and daisies, right? It wouldn't be long before the family was back on the DCFS radar. In November of 2016, when Noah was just a little over 2 years old, Kaiser Permanente called DCFS to let them know that Noah had missed his last 8 doctor's appointments. In fact, these 8 appointments were missed over the course of 6 months. Because of Noah's young age and his history with DCFS, it was really important that he was being seen by a doctor. This isn't just important for at-risk children. Babies and toddlers need to reach a lot of developmental milestones. If Noah wasn't showing up for his doctor's appointments, there was no way for professionals to monitor his progress. Ursula claimed it was an issue with the family's insurance, but that was quickly proven to be a lie. A social worker verified Noah always had medical coverage. It had never lapsed. And again, DCFS had to intervene. They visited the family's home to investigate. They found that Noah was so weak and malnourished that he couldn't even walk, which placed him in the first percentile for boys his age. At 2 years old, he weighed just 17 pounds. The average weight for a 2-year-old boy should be between 27 and 30 pounds. He was almost half that. Jennifer Montano said that he appeared very thin. His eyes were hollow. Again, if Noah had been going to his regular doctor's appointments, this would have been a non-issue. Ursula and Jose had hidden the little boy for a reason. Ursula said Noah ate too much, which made him vomit and thus not gain weight. She explained that he was a troublemaker and would run around the house eating everything until he couldn't take any more and threw up. Once again, Noah was removed from his parents' custody. This time, he was placed in a treatment center called Matthias House in the San Gabriel Valley. There, the goal was to restore his health, which is exactly what happened. Noah didn't have any of the issues his parents claimed, such as vomiting or naughty behavior. The administrator of Matthias House, Michelle Thompson, said he was not quite caught up but almost there. He was running around. He was sliding on the slide. He would call himself No-No. Afterward, Noah was returned to the care of his great-grandmother, Evangelina. During this time, the two lit up each other's lives. By now, Noah was walking, talking, and singing. His favorite song was Old MacDonald. He loved cuddles and would hug his great-grandmother and say, "You know what time it is, Grandma? It's time for you to hold me and tell me you love me." Even though Evangelina once again had temporary custody of Noah, his parents were granted visitation. They were allowed to take him for a few hours at a time, which broke Evangelina's heart. Noah would scream and cry for up to 45 minutes before and after each visit, and kept telling her that he didn't want to go. It didn't even really seem like Ursula and Jose were that enthusiastic about being with their son either. The couple never made their son a priority. Oftentimes, they bailed on visitation, much to Noah's benefit. But when it came to the DCFS investigations against them, the couple made it seem like they really wanted Noah back and fought to get their way. In 2017, the DCFS investigation that had Noah removed for the second time lasted 1.5 years. Noah would be returned to his parents, but Ursula and Jose were given stipulations, including enrolling Noah in daycare and therapy. He needed to show up at his doctor's appointments, and the couple needed to complete a parenting program with a focus on parent-child bonding. All of this would be arranged with the help of DCFS, and they would have a specific social worker to help them oversee the process. Since Evangelina no longer had legal custody, all she could do was stand by her great-grandson and try to advocate for him. There were a lot of new social workers coming in and out of the picture, so she made it her duty to make sure they were all informed about what was really going on with Noah. Eventually, DCFS social worker Susan Johnson was assigned to Noah's case. She was the person who fought harder for the boy than anybody else. Her job as a continuing services child social worker required her to oversee the reunification of the family and report back to the courts. Her colleagues had warned her that Ursula and Jose were manipulators and proven liars. Ms. Johnson read through all of Noah's case files and made it a point to listen to the concerns of Evangelina, who at this point felt pretty dismissed by the system. In addition, Ms. Johnson made a number of visits to the family home, where she was able to make contact with Noah. Ms. Johnson expressed a lot of concern regarding Noah. He seemed to exhibit telltale signs of CA and neglect. She noticed this in some of the other children as well, but no one really seemed to be as bad off as Noah. Ms. Johnson was worried that Noah was being used as a scapegoat in his family. According to psychologists, some families will adopt the method of a scapegoat to cope with their dysfunctional families, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. They will sometimes choose one member of the family to inherit all of the blame for their problems. Anything bad that happens within the family is assigned to one of the children, and they take the biggest punishment, mentally and physically. Several months into the reunification plan, Ursula and Jose failed to enroll Noah in therapy or daycare. They never completed the parenting classes they were supposed to take. In fact, they ignored everything the court was requiring them to do. Noah was never placed in therapy or daycare, and he was telling family members and social workers that he didn't want to be with his parents. Despite Ursula and Jose's unwillingness to cooperate, the courts decided to keep moving forward with the reunification plan. Ms. Johnson told the court that Ursula and Jose had lied to her multiple times. They continually lied about obtaining medical insurance, and they still weren't getting Noah medical attention that he needed. Ursula even lied about being pregnant. She denied 2 pregnancies, only to give birth both times. Allegedly, Ursula tried to sneak out of the hospital with her baby because she knew that DCFS was going to be called, and that would open a new investigation. Susan Johnson would try to make unannounced home visits to the family, but most of the time, they wouldn't answer the door. They would make excuses such as claiming that they weren't home at the time. It was impossible for Susan to enter the home, and she didn't have an official warrant. By the spring of 2019, when Noah was 4 years old, his life hadn't gotten any better. He was no closer to a normal childhood, and the few advocates he had looking out for him seemed to be meeting constant obstacles in their way. In March of 2019, Ms. Johnson showed up at the address Ursula and Jose claimed to live at, only to find they didn't actually live there. Jose's sister answered the door instead. She said her brother and his kids had not lived there for at least 4 months. Jose's mother, Nubia Barrios, said the family occasionally stayed there and confessed to being worried about her grandkids. Noah was always hungry, according to Ms. Barrios, who also worried about her grandchildren not being in school. In March of 2019, Noah's aunt, Maggie Hernandez, called the hotline to report a troubling conversation that she had with Noah. In this conversation, Noah told her some things that led her to believe that he was not only the victim of CA, but SA as well. She said that it wasn't just this conversation that made her think that he was experiencing SA, but also a change in his entire personality. His demeanor was completely different. During an overnight stay, Noah had night terrors and complained that his butt was hurting him. Above all, Noah was changing from an exuberant boy to quite a fearful one. She said she was very worried that nobody else would be willing to advocate for him. Susan Johnson learned about this report as well. When she read it, she immediately paid a visit to the home to investigate. What she found on this visit was the last straw for her. Noah's arms and neck were covered in bruises, and his back was completely lathered in some thick white cream. Ursula tried to explain that the bruising on his neck and upper arms was just because Noah was clumsy. She also said that the cream on his back was for eczema. This visit raised every red flag, and Ms. Johnson immediately shared the information with her superiors. She told them about his extensive bruising, and that it seemed like Noah was being coached about what was happening to him. He told Ms. Johnson that he was being hit, but then later recanted his statement, which is something often seen in victims of CA and DV, and something we saw with Anthony Avalos before him. His parents had also been given countless opportunities to give him medical attention and enroll him in school and therapy, which they were court-ordered to do. However, they were not doing anything to help Noah, and his condition was only getting worse. Ms. Johnson argued that Noah needed to be taken away from his parents for a third time, but when she brought this up, she was told that she needed a warrant, which wasn't going to be easy to obtain. It seemed that her superiors were not paying much attention to her concerns. The only thing Susan could do was file a report and let investigators look into the case. However, as we've seen in other cases, such as that of Gabriel Fernandez and Anthony Avalos, as soon as investigators got involved, a new caseworker is brought in to take the lead on the case. This new caseworker was Maggie Vasquez Ducas. As soon as she entered the picture, she started to undo all of Ms. Johnson's work. She did not read any of Noah's reports. The very first time she showed up at the residence, she found a smiling Ursula and Noah covered in bruises. Ursula and Jose immediately began explaining that he had fallen from his bunk bed. Ms. Ducas believed them right away. They went on to explain how the previous social worker, Susan Johnson, and the rest of DCFS were out to get them. They told her they were being targeted due to racism, and that DCFS had already done enough to break her family apart. Ursula also said, "Why would we hurt our baby when we just got him back? I've had this case open for 4 years, and I've been told I'm good enough to only have my 2 kids, but not Noah. How does that make sense?" It didn't take much to fool Ms. Ducas into believing that they were honest. When she talked to Noah, he denied any claims of CA or SA. As such, she decided that none of the previous reports were truthful either, and closed her investigation as inconclusive. At the same time, Susan Johnson still hadn't given up on Noah, and was desperately working to get him out of his toxic household. She filed a complaint with the courts, resulting in a petition to remove Noah from his parents' custody for a third time. She also followed through on her superior's challenge to get the warrant. The juvenile court granted the order to remove Noah and have him examined to determine if SA had occurred. The petition was signed by a juvenile court judge in the early summer of 2019. When her superiors heard that she had actually gone ahead to obtain the warrant to remove him from the household, they called their own emergency meeting where Susan Johnson, Maggie Vasquez Ducas, and DCFS leaders discussed Noah's case and whether or not they were going to follow through. Ms. Johnson later recalled trying to advocate for Noah in this meeting. She tried to warn everyone that if they didn't act on this court order, they could have a dead kid on their hands. One of the members told Ms. Johnson to stop talking, while Ms. Ducas said she believed the boy was fine and that there was nothing, absolutely nothing, wrong with the family. Ms. Ducas also accused Ms. Johnson of siding with Evangelina Hernandez in an attempt to sabotage the family and keep them away from Noah. She also said that she was concerned that if DCFS had any more involvement, they would be guilty of discrimination due to Ursula and Jose being Latino. Despite there being an active court order to remove Noah from his parents' custody, no one ever followed through with it. Ms. Ducas, her superiors, and DCFS decided they needed to conduct a more thorough investigation before they could justify such drastic measures as removing Noah for a third time. At this point, Susan Johnson is completely removed from the case. Maggie Vasquez Ducas and another social worker are once again assigned. Social workers have 10 days to take children from their homes after a commissioner issues a removal order. Otherwise, they must alert the court if they don't plan to do so. But by mid-June, 29 days had passed, and no one ever told the juvenile court that he remained with his parents. In the summer of 2019, the Quatchers were living in an apartment in Palmdale, California. Now, around this time, Maggie Vasquez Ducas and other social workers paid visits to their apartment. They found Noah with a cut across his face. Ursula and Jose provided 3 different explanations for how Noah received this injury. Allegedly, Noah came running up to them a number of times to announce things like, "They gave me lots of food, and they take good care of me." These were obvious signs that Noah had been coached to cover up what his parents were doing. After these visits, Ms. Ducas reported to the courts that she still needed more time. It was granted an additional 30 days to investigate the case. She emailed her supervisor saying that even though it was court-ordered, Noah didn't need an examination because there were no reports of SA. Ms. Ducas tried to visit the family several more times, but was denied and verbally attacked by Jose and Ursula. Despite being Latina herself, They claimed that she was racist and wanted to take their child. Still, Ms. Dukas kept defending them. She went on to claim that they were just overwhelmed by their previous experiences with social services. Sometime on July 5, 2019, a neighbor at the Mountain Shadows Apartments in Palmdale walked by the family apartment and heard a child's cries, "No daddy, no mommy." Just after 6 p.m., 911 dispatchers received a call from the Palmdale apartment complex. It was Ursula. She told the dispatcher that they needed an ambulance and that her son Noah had been found unresponsive in the pool. Allegedly, according to her, a 4-year-old had been swimming in the pool and drowned as a result of a terrible accident. She said that they were trying to revive him, but were unsuccessful. When the paramedics arrived on the scene, their story did not add up. Noah was fully clothed, and he was completely dry. He didn't look like a boy that was just pulled from a pool. Noah was taken to the hospital, first at the Palmdale Regional Medical Center and later at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. No family members made it to Noah's bedside. Dr. John Markham, who treated Noah, said he joined a group of doctors and nurses who held the boy's hands in his final moments. He said, "We were with him as he left the earth." Noah Quadro was pronounced dead the following morning. He was 1 month shy of his 5th birthday. Noah's body revealed clues that were inconsistent with an accidental drowning, and a medical examiner would later find that he didn't have any water in his lungs. In fact, his autopsy reported bruising all over his body. He had multiple broken ribs that were in various stages of healing, pointing to prolonged chronic beatings. The autopsy also revealed undeniable evidence of SA. They found trauma to Noah's rectum, but could not determine what had caused it. Noah was killed by means of extensive torture. Noah's cause of death was strangulation and blunt force trauma, and the manner of death, a homicide. Police had their eyes on only one pair of suspects. Now to an eyewitness news investigation. New video and frantic calls to 911 after the death of 4-year-old Noah Quadro last summer. Noah's parents told police the boy drowned in a swimming pool, but according to grand jury testimony just released, the parents staged a scene to derail investigators. Our Miriam Hernandez has the story you're seeing first on Eyewitness News. You have to go faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 911 call. 4-year-old Noah Quadro unconscious on the living room floor. His parents telling first responders they had just pulled him from the swimming pool. "We brought him upstairs because we're trying to get him. We were trying to think like maybe he'll wake up." "Where are you at right now?" "His head is that way." "Yeah, where?" "Right here. In the house." "In the house? Where in the house?" "In the living room." "Okay, so you're in the living room." And I glanced down. Noah's father, Jose Quadro, reenacting his desperate CPR attempts at their Palmdale apartment on July 5th last year. And I was just like, Noah, come on son, please breathe." Their story soon unraveled. Jose Quadro and Noah's mother, Ursula Juarez, are charged with the torture and murder of Noah. The case has the Department of Children and Family Services under fire too. Just 8 weeks before Noah's death, a DCFS worker, Susan Johnson, had obtained a judge's order to remove Noah from his home. But Johnson's supervisors intervened. Noah died in a home DCFS itself had deemed high risk. A deputy responding to the 911 call describes how in the hospital the parents' lives were exposed. He was transported to the hospital. No signs of drowning at all. No water in the lungs, but there's signs of physical. What doctors and the coroner did find were bruises all over, healing rib fractures, brain swelling, and injuries consistent with sexual assault, cause of death, asphyxiation, and blunt force trauma. It's looking like there's some sort of strangulation of some sort and stigmatization. Noah and his siblings had been in and out of care. Prosecutors allege Jose Quatro targeted Noah, believing the boy was not his son. That at age 2, back with the parents, Noah weighed 17 pounds and could not walk on his own. Noah's mother sent a chilling text message. "Almost killed him so many times. I had to do CPR for him to wake up and stay alive, right?" A check of security cameras at the pool showed no sign of Noah or his family that day. And about the frantic effort to revive Noah, there's evidence that Noah was unconscious hours before the parents called 911. The day after Noah's death, Ursula and Jose were both arrested and his remaining siblings were put into protective custody. Both Ursula and Jose were charged with CA and homicide. It was set at $4 million for Jose and $3 million for Ursula. Their case was brought to a grand jury in 2020. The two of them were indicted on counts of homicide and torture, and Jose was charged with SA against a minor resulting in death. If convicted as charged, Jose faced a possible maximum sentence of 47 years to life in state prison. Ursula faced up to 32 years. As we mentioned previously, the death penalty was off the table thanks to Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaskin, who didn't do any favors for Anthony Avalos either. In 2020, Evangelina Hernandez filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of herself and Noah's surviving siblings. Stated that instead of protecting Noah and his siblings, DCFS continued to place the children with their violent parents, where the children continued to be mistreated over the course of several years. It also claimed that after Noah's death, DCFS social workers made threats against Evangelina in an attempt to silence her. They told her that if she made any public statements about Noah's case and her potential lawsuits, she would lose her request for guardianship of her other 3 great-grandchildren and would never see them again. The lawsuit was settled in December of 2024, but the details of the settlement have not been made public. Hathaway Sycamore's Child and Family Services, who you'll also remember from the Anthony Avalos case, was named as an additional defendant. The agency knew of, or suspected, the misconduct occurring in Noah's home after the boy was sent to them by DCFS for mental health services, but failed to report the misconduct. In February of 2023, social worker Lisbeth Hernandez Aviles testified that a property manager at the family's apartment told her that he had heard crying coming from inside and suspected DV going on. The social worker also testified that the children all slept on one mattress in the living room, and that the home was filthy and emanated a foul odor. On March 29, 2024, both Ursula Juarez and Jose Cuatro Jr. pled no contest to their charges, which included 1 count each of first-degree murder and torture for Jose, and 1 count each of second-degree murder and torture for Ursula. On April 30, 2024, Superior Court Judge Robert Chu sentenced Jose to 32 years to life in prison and Ursula to 22 years to life. As part of their plea deal, the disgraced parents waived their appellate rights. At the hearing, great-grandmother Evangelina told the couple, "Why, my God, why is there such evil in you, Ursula? What kind of monster are you, Jose? You're both very sick. You are the worst kind of sickos." As of the date of this recording, in December of 2024, Ursula is currently being housed at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, alongside Pearl Hernandez and Heather Barron, while Jose is being held at the Substance Abuse Treatment Facility and State Prison in Corcoran. To be noted, out of all 3 of those cases that we've just covered, this case is the only one where the parents did not get life in prison. In the wake of Noah's death, Deputy District Attorney Jonathan Hatami summoned several DCF staffers who worked on Noah's case, including Maggie Vasquez-Ducas and her supervisor. Both acknowledged they had not actually read Susan Johnson's 26-page filing to the juvenile court to remove Noah, despite opposing it. Stunned, the prosecutor asked Ms. Ducas, "You're telling this jury that you decided not to follow the removal order that you never read. Is that accurate?" She said she had, but then further explained that she read it after Noah passed away. None of the high-ranking DCF administrators testified. Noah Alejandro Cuatro was laid to rest at the San Fernando Mission Cemetery in Mission Hills, California. During a private service, loved ones remembered the little boy who loved Spider-Man, ponies, and PJ Masks and was excited about starting school. Allegedly, his beloved great-grandmother, Evangelina, was banned from attending his funeral. His gravestone, decorated with the little boy's picture and a guitar, bore the inscription, "A hug, a kiss in heaven's bliss, gone too soon, our baby." So why did this happen? Why were claims made for change and nothing happened as a result? What other cases do we not know about? Because these cannot be the only ones. What if the reporter gave into the immense pressure to stop and decided not to dig into Gabriel's case? Would we have known about any of these boys? If you've seen the Netflix documentary, The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, I think we have a good idea what the answer is, because before Gabriel's case was blown wide open by the LA Times, he was little more than a blurb in the homicide docket. He was swept under the rug like some sort of statistic, and nobody cared about him outside of those that actually knew him. Sadly, this is the fate of many children that die at the hands of their violent parents or caregivers. Cases where those meant to protect them want to turn a blind eye and pretend it didn't happen on their watch. Governing bodies who overload caseworkers, or in the case of Susan Johnson, punish those for doing what's in the best interest of children. Given what we've seen with these 3 cases, it is likely that there are other children, just like them, who were never reported on. Until massive change happens in LA County, there will be more Gabriels, more Anthonys, and more Noahs. Case 4. What if I told you that this photo hides the most disturbing secret? Something so horrifying you can't even imagine. The smiling little girl in the picture is 4-year-old Heidi Jones, and she's standing at the very crime scene where she discovered her mother's lifeless body, just days before this photo was taken. If you look closely, you can still see traces of blood on the floor. The real nightmare was that the killer disappeared without a single trace. A few days later, when Heidi finds herself at her mother's funeral, looking at her mom lying in the coffin, in that moment, she makes a firm decision to devote her life to bringing her mother's killer to justice. He must pay for what he did. I remember looking in the casket, and I thought she looked like Sleeping Beauty. It was really hard to see Loretta, and there's her daughter Heidi, just crying, realizing that her mother is gone now. For more than 40 years, the circumstances surrounding Loretta Jones' murder remained a mystery. But as it turned out, the answer had been hidden within this very picture all along. I said, that doesn't happen except the movies. She says it was right there, plain view. Loretta writing the name of the killer in blood. As the sun dipped below the horizon on a warm summer evening, 4-year-old Heidi Jones was getting ready for bed when her mother, Loretta, gently pushed the bedroom door open. That night, my mom came to my bedroom and she told me don't come out. And I believe that if I heard any sound or anything that night, I did what my mom told me to do. And I didn't go out. The next morning, Heidi recalled her mother's words from the night before and hesitated, peeking through the keyhole before stepping into the living room. As she slowly opened the door, she caught sight of something lying on the floor. After that, everything became a blur, as if her memories had been wiped away. My next vivid memory is I am out on the front porch, and my next door neighbor is out there digging for worms. He says, "Heidi, come here, I have to show you something." And I says, "I can't. I think my mom is dead." When police arrived at the scene, they found Loretta lying motionless on the floor, partially dressed. There was blood everywhere, on the couch, the walls, covering nearly every surface. She had been assayed. She was stabbed twice in the chest and 17 times in her back. Her throat was attempted to be cut. The investigation didn't reveal any forced entry, any real signs of tremendous struggle. There wasn't tipped-over furniture, there wasn't broken windows, the door jamb wasn't broken. Investigators collected a significant amount of forensic evidence, fingerprints, blood samples, and fibers from the carpet and couch upholstery. Meanwhile, little Heidi had spent the morning at a neighbor's house. Detectives waited for her relatives to arrive before speaking with her, the only potential witness to the crime. When Heidi's grandparents arrived, detectives carefully asked the little girl about what she had seen and heard the previous night. A 4-year-old child, of course, couldn't say much, but one thing she was sure of, her mother hadn't screamed, cried, or called for help. The 4-year-old's memory was murky, except for one very important detail. I remember telling my grandma what I could possibly remember. I said Tom did it. Tom killed my mom. That's how investigators got their first clue. A name. Just Tom. No surname, no photo, no description. It was the only thing little Heidi could recall about the man who had taken her mother from her. But even that small detail spoke volumes. Tom was clearly someone who had been in Loretta's life regularly, familiar enough for a 4-year-old to remember. Heidi wouldn't have recalled his name unless he had spent time in their home, or if she hadn't recognized his presence behind her bedroom door that night. While Loretta's family and friends struggled to think of anyone named Tom, detectives uncovered a new lead, an odd incident that had occurred just 3 blocks from Loretta's home, and more importantly, shortly before her tragic death. That evening, 10-year-old Lori Kulo was cycling around the house while her older brother played ball with his friend. At one point, she rounded the corner and saw the boys go inside. As the sky grew darker, Lori decided to follow them. But as she was heading home, a man suddenly appeared in her path. He grabbed her and forced her against the side of the house, holding her arms behind her back. He was stepping on my feet and another hand over my mouth. I was trying to scream, and I couldn't get the scream out. It just wouldn't come out. I was terrified. I couldn't get away from him. Fortunately, when the man's grip on Lori's mouth loosened for a moment, she didn't panic and screamed at the top of her lungs. Her brother, her stepdad, and her brother's friend ran outside to see what was going on, and they saw this suspect running. She pushed her away and ran off in the direction of the south. 3 blocks down, he was near Loretta Jones's house. Detectives quickly concluded that the attack on Lori and Loretta's death were linked. so they focused their search on a single suspect. The police combed the area, questioning anyone who had been near Jones's house or in the surrounding neighborhood. They found an individual that was hitchhiking from Price to the town of Provo. This gentleman was carrying a pocket knife with what they thought was blood on it. The man was arrested and taken to Price, but when Lori Kulo arrived with her mother for the identification, she quickly stated that it wasn't him. The knife didn't match the injuries on Loretta either. To make matters worse for the police, the man was able to prove that he had been nowhere near the area at the time of the crime. The unfortunate hitchhiker was released. Suddenly, the call that reached the sheriff's office on August 1st gave investigators a real sense of hope. The caller suggested that detectives take a closer look at a local railroad worker named Tom Egley. I knew that Loretta had dated Tom Egley one time on a blind date. I thought she didn't like him, and she didn't want anything to do with this guy. Still, given what little Heidi had said, every lead needed to be thoroughly vetted. Tom had been staying at a motel in Helper, Utah with his pregnant girlfriend, who was just a month away from giving birth. Detectives picked him up and brought him to the sheriff's office for questioning. As expected, he denied any involvement and shared his version of the events from that night. He claimed that a group of teenagers had given him a ride and dropped him off in Price, near a small local diner. There, he grabbed a burger, sat on the curb, and ate it. After that, he stayed in Price and was just wandering around and window shopping. He insisted he had never been anywhere near the homes of Lori Kulo or Loretta Jones. Staff at the Highway Rendezvous Bar on Spring Glen Road confirmed that Tom Egley had been there on the night of July 30th, between 11 o'clock and 11:30 p.m. However, the bar owner noted that Egley appeared tense and uneasy. There were also red stains on his shirt, but when asked about them, he claimed he had been painting and that the marks were just red paint. The cops met up with Tom at his apartment, and he allowed them in to let them search his room. They did take a pair of Levi's that Tom said he was wearing that night and a shirt. Detectives collected Egley's clothing for a forensic analysis and took samples of his hair, blood, and fingerprints. It was all sent to the FBI crime lab in Washington, D.C. A month later, the test results came back. Fibers from Egley's clothing were a match to those found in Loretta Jones' carpet. With this key evidence, Egley was arrested. Investigators suspected that after attempting to attack an 11-year-old girl, Egley had been chased through the neighborhood. Spotting Loretta's house, he may have chosen it as a hiding place. Detectives then asked Lori Kulo and her older brother to come to the station to see if they could identify Egley as the man who had attacked her that night. During the preliminary hearing, new witnesses came forward confirming that Tom had been in town on the day of the crime. Later that night, he was also seen at the bar, something investigators were already aware of. However, what once seemed like solid fiber evidence completely fell apart. Since Egley had previously been to the Jones home, it was entirely possible that fibers from the carpets, Loretta's hair, or other traces had naturally transferred onto his clothing. In the end, Tom Egley was released. He had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The detectives started from scratch, with their only lead being the vague recollection of the victim's 4-year-old daughter, which didn't offer much to the investigation. A year after Loretta's death, the case had become as cold as the harsh Utah winter winds. For years later, Heidi faced another loss when her grandfather passed away. Mr. Jones never fully came to terms with the death of his daughter, yet the family tried to move on with their lives. As Heidi grew older and started school, her daily routine and new friendships occasionally helped her push the painful memories about the dark days aside. But those days were real, and they still hurt. Whenever Heidi tried to talk to her grandmother about her mother, Mrs. Jones would only cry. By that point, the elderly woman had reached a place where she just wanted Loretta to rest in peace. But Heidi wasn't willing to let her mother's case fade into the past. In 1989, young Heidi Jones launched a personal campaign, writing letters to various officials in a desperate attempt to seek justice. I wrote to Price City Police Chief. I wrote to Cartman County Sheriff's Office. I wrote to the FBI. But it seemed like the more that I pressed for information on my mom's case, I started hitting brick wall after brick wall. I was getting nowhere. At some point, she gathered all her notes and letters, tucked them away in a folder, and set them aside, hoping to return to them someday. I know that my mom would have gone to great lengths to do whatever she needed to do for me, and she proved that the night she was murdered. How could I just let that go? My mom was my hero that night. I owed it to her. I owed it to her to do something about this. Over time, Heidi returned to Utah. But once again, Her efforts to solve the mystery of her mother's death failed one after another. Every conversation with authorities led to the same response. We've done everything we can. There are no more leaves. Then, unexpectedly, an unpleasant incident ended up giving her the breakthrough she had been waiting for. Over the 4th of July weekend in 2009, Heidi's car was stolen. Frustrated, she posted about it on Facebook, where an old high school acquaintance, David Brewer, replied, "Wish I were closer. I'd help." Heidi remembered David from high school. He was a year ahead of her. As they talked about her stolen car, she learned that he now worked for the Carbon County Sheriff's Office in Price, Utah. That detail immediately caught her attention. Years ago, it was the same office that had handled her mother's case. Without hesitation, Heidi called David and shared her mother's story. After meeting her in person, David agreed to help and start searching the archives for any case files. But it was quickly discovered that there was no case file, and there was no box of evidence. They were thrown away or missing. While searching the forensic office, Detective Brewer finally came across something, a set of documents from the original case, including a detailed autopsy report. They did have a very good detailed medical examiner's report. It was discovered that a vaginal swab had been done, and there was semen present on it. And with today's standards, of course, in DNA, I thought I could have this guy in 10 minutes if I just had that swab. But there was one major problem. The evidence was missing. It wasn't the result of anything sinister or mysterious, just years of negligence and indifference from law enforcement. Determined to uncover the truth, David published a newspaper article, hoping the public might help fill in the missing pieces. Before long, he received a call from a woman who claimed to have information about the case. She said, "Have I ever seen that Loretta wrote the killer's name in blood?" And I says, "How would you know this anyway? I mean, you weren't allowed in the crime scene." At the time, Heidi was staying with her grandmother. The day after Loretta's body was discovered, Mr. Jones, Heidi's grandfather, asked her and one of his daughters to visit the house. The police allowed them inside briefly to collect some of Heidi's belongings and clothes. The woman who had called the detective insisted she had seen letters T and O written in blood. Loretta had tried to point to her attacker, but hadn't managed to finish writing the full name. Brewer and his team worked tirelessly to track down the photo in the archives, and eventually, they found it. When they opened the envelope containing the photograph, they realized the woman had been telling the truth. Wow, that is heavy-duty stuff. I get goosebumps right now thinking about that. The letters T and O were easily identifiable, without a doubt. These were not some random smudges of blood from a finger. We pulled the photo up, blew it up, and there was definite T and an O written in blood. Brewer started speaking with all the witnesses who had testified in the 1970 Tom Egley case, including one who hadn't spoken before. It was Marcia Hidalgo, who had been Egley's girlfriend at the time. All I was ever told, this girl that he had been going with before I got there, had been stabbed 14 times. What do you remember about that night? You know, I was pregnant. I waited up for him. He didn't come. It was late. Tom had come home around 3 a.m. I was kind of ticked, Where were you at? He's like, "Oh, I'm here now." And he went in, and he took a bath in his clothes. He bathed in his clothes? He bathed in his clothes. After Tom Egley took a bath, he stripped off his clothes, placed them in a bag, and the following day, took them to the laundromat where a trash barrel was. He threw the bag inside. Brewer asked Marcia Hidalgo if she had told the police what she had just shared with him. She confirmed that she had. David could tell she was not being dishonest. At the time, she was pregnant with Egley's child, but that wasn't an issue for the investigation. It was more about her own conscience. Brewer now faced the difficult task of telling Tom Egley that the pieces of the story he had gathered all pointed directly to him. Okay, 11:35 a.m. I'm approaching the residence of Thomas Edward Egley for an interview. Tom Egley was found in Rocky Ford, Colorado. Wanted to know if we could take some of your time this morning, talk to you about some issues back in Carbon County a few years back. Carbon County? Well, got any idea why you think we might be here to talk to you? Well, years ago, one of my ex-girlfriends was killed. They arrested me for it, but they turned me loose. He repeated the same story. I stopped at a drive-in or something there and got me a hamburger. I know I sat down on the curb and ate it. There was nothing going on, so I headed back. Marcia was at the hotel with the baby, so she knew I was gone. Loretta's daughter, frankly, named you back then. Well, yeah, she knew my name. I've been there. Brewer continued to ask him pointed, challenging questions, pushing him for more. Do you think that person would deserve to go to jail now? Depends on whether he's done it again or not, It almost seemed like Tom was hinting that he was the one who had done it, and that he should be forgiven since it only happened once. Was that his way of saying it? In the end, though, the detectives walked away with nothing. Something comes up, be sure to call. 40 years had passed, and Brewer felt powerless. He was certain it was Tom, but there just wasn't enough evidence. In 2016, Brewer presented Loretta's case at a regional cold case seminar. A woman from a private forensic lab stood up and shared that they had successfully extracted DNA from graves even after 50 years. With the advancements in science, she suggested it might be time to exhume Loretta's body. Heidi's reply was quick and firm. "Hand me a shovel, I'll help dig." So as they were pulling the body out of the ground, water started pouring out of the vault. The crime scene investigator looked at it and says, "No, we're not going to find any DNA here." David Brewer chose not to give up, but to bluff instead. He called a journalist friend at the Rocky Ford Gazette, claiming he had a suspect from the area, and that DNA had been found on the victim's body during the exhumation. In truth, the DNA wasn't essential. David just needed to make Tom believe it was. This strategy led to an unexpected call. Lisa Carter reached out to him. "I knew Tom Egley well. He was my neighbor, and he was a friend of my dad's." The woman was certain Tom was responsible for Loretta's death, but suspicions alone didn't carry any weight in the investigation. Then Lisa offered something truly valuable. It was like a gift from above. She was willing to do whatever it took, even going undercover. Of course, such a move required approval from the higher-ups, so Brewer's partner took care of that and came back with the green light. Their only instruction: don't return without a confession. Lisa's husband, a police officer, was away for a few days on a training session, and Tom knew that. This gave them the perfect foundation for their plan. "Can I smoke in here, Tom?" "Sure." Lisa went to Tom with the idea of convincing him she was planning to betray her husband. "I'm sick. If I was here, I'm done." She told him her husband had been training in Utah, during which Loretta Jones' case and Tom's possible involvement was a topic of discussion. More importantly, she made it clear that Tom was not just a past suspect, but was currently under suspicion. I said, "I've known Tom 20-plus years." He said, "Tom's kind of in a bad spot." And I said, "What do they have?" He said that they still have the swabs from the night of the killing that the people from the autopsy took. Well, I don't know how they could have DNA. Lisa also explained that, as a friend of her late father, she felt it was her duty to protect him, believing her father would have wanted her to help him, even though he had passed away. And how far did Loretta live from the sandwich place? Not very far, I don't think. Lisa continued to play her part, carefully drawing Tom into a small confession. He confessed that he had been nearby, knocked on Loretta's door, and she had let him in. Okay, and the door closed, and then what? What would you think happened? If you had to guess, what would you think happened? I would turn down for sex. Okay, and that made you feel how? Like S******. Tom went on to explain that Loretta had gone to the kitchen, stepped outside, and shut the door behind her. And when she'd come back, I stabbed her. He said that at that point, Loretta was still alive, but struggling to breathe. Tom then claimed that he SAD'd her, thinking it was consensual. Lisa, who had been controlling her emotions until then, suddenly shouted, "Tom, you stabbed her." How could that have been consensual? Tom replied calmly, "She never told me no." "So you remember having sex with her, and then what?" "I lost it. I cut her throat, and I left." Detective Brewer now had a legally obtained confession from the perpetrator, but Lisa took it a step further. She persuaded Tom that it was in both his and his family's best interest to bring this matter to a close. While the audio recording was valuable, she explained that without a voluntary confession, they would have to go through long, numerous hearings and proceedings. Lisa wanted to protect Loretta Jones' family from having to endure all of that. Tom Egley agreed to talk to Brewer, but on one condition. The police could not arrest him during the meeting. "It's been 46 years, so I'm scared every time somebody shows up at my door. It's a hard thing to look over your shoulder that long." "Yeah, it is, it really is." Out of the blue, Tom started speaking. "We had sex. There was no rape involved." "Okay. I lost it because I'd been drinking." "Do you remember cutting her throat?" "Yeah, but I don't remember ever stabbing her." "Okay." Before the detectives left his house, they asked him one last question. "If you could tell Loretta's daughter anything in the world right now, what would you tell her?" A few minutes later, Brewer called Heidi to give her the answer to that very question. Tom had told him to pass along that he was truly sorry for taking her mother's life. Detective David Brewer kept his word. Tom Egley was arrested by local police once the investigation team returned to Utah. He agreed to admit his guilt in the case of Loretta Jones. Tom Egley was given a sentence of 10 life terms, the maximum punishment possible in 1970. He will be 96 years old when he goes out before the parole board, and I will make sure he doesn't get out. When the verdict was delivered at the trial, he was allowed to speak. He said, "I regret what I did, and I'm surprised that you're doing something about it after 46 years. This wasn't about closure. This was all about getting justice. When David and I first started working together, 1% of all cold cases were solved. 1%. I learned to believe in the impossible. And as long as you have hope, you have a chance."